Good evening, everyone. And welcome to the meeting of the planning board, and thank you all for coming on a off night. I guess that, Gail, thank you for making that happen. I understand it was a little bit easier said than done, so I appreciate Mark and town clerk and Gail making that happen. Happy post 4th of July. I'll call the meeting to order and let's take a roll call. Laura Tenney. Here. Peter Morton.
Here.
Sue Philbrick.
Here.
Sarah Creighton's here.
Gordon
Gordon
Brister.
Brister. Here. Mary Foley.
Yeah.
And Chris Olney is absent so far. Great. So the first order of business is we are going to resume the public hearing for, is it both?
Both.
Both. I was corrected the other day. Apologies.
Thank you for getting that right.
Welcome.
Infrastructure and Environmental LLC for Reed Park, Morris Fisherman's Pier, and Phase 2 Tux Point Public Dock Expansion. And if nobody objects, let's start with Tux Point, because we did it the other way around and kind of had to rush for Tux Point last time, and we did a site walk last Monday to the 3 sites. So I think the board has a pretty good sense of what's planned and what is what's proposed. So I guess the question would be, first, is the applicant, the town, or both on Tux Point have any new information or any additional information you want to present?
This is Nate. Excuse me. I'd say just one clarification I made in the field last week when I said there was going to be a form liner facade over the side. We are actually showing it as granite stones going over the side of the new infill area and the concrete abutment.
Great.
So just one clarification from the site visit last week.
Okay.
And that is base bid versus doing it as an alternate.
Great, thank you, Nate. Okay. Any other important changes or clarifications on that project? Oh, there he is. It's only here. We talked about a number of possible several possible conditions for that permit. What's your from here? I believe it was the wall area that Nate just described, having that be granite was one of them. So I guess if the plans show that, then we're good on that. And the other was to have a process or a member of the team to ensure that the historic elements of the railings and the detailing is in fact preserved as was represented, I guess. But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, that basically captures the comment about architectural integrity of the millwork, considering that as they're dismantling the rotunda itself, if they find any rot or conditions that need to be addressed, they would have the architect on board for that. And if there was any detailing of the site ramp itself that required a landscape architect, that we talked about bringing both a landscape architect and an architect in a limited scope to advise with the kind of preservation of the structure.
So for like the wording of the condition would be something like, consistent historic railings and trim for the rotunda and area.
Architectural elements.
Architectural elements, consistent with the existing.
Well, consistent with, we would follow the same profiles that are actually established out there.
Yes.
So that they would have to document all that.
And then for the ramp, same kind of wording.
Same kind of wording.
Yes,
Yeah,
Say
landscape
consistent,
architectural elements. Yeah.
elements of
finishes.
granite blocks along the sides
Yep.
of the elevated ramps
Yep.
to the raised rotunda.
Yes, the detailing of the ramp and
Yeah, so
specifically.
those would be kind of the way you probably word the two conditions.
Any other?
One question, Sarah, do we
Yeah.
get to look at the final plans when they're done? To see that these conditions actually are incorporated in the design
Yes,
itself?
Bill?
No, not as built. This,
Yeah.
this is the design construction drawings prior to becoming a as-built condition, so that we understand it was done.
Question. Nate, where are we on actually, is he still on?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry, I'm on, not on video, I'm doing
That's
dinner
okay.
right now.
I
11-month-old.
I have so many screens, I can't tell. where you
Yep.
are.
I would say that's where my role comes in, ensuring that, we're meeting the conditions of, any, whether it's Concom, planning board, and ensuring that Foth has incorporated all of those conditions into the design set. Rotunda plans, tuck point plans are, I'd say, a 60% permitting set, but, I don't think there's a lot, there's some structural details I think we need to work out, but the general, concept is on the plans. Ben, can you elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah, I was just gonna say as a follow-up to Nate too, all of those like special permit, Concom conditions, those all get carried into the bid set and then are a requirement for the contractor to follow when they go into construction. So if we are working with the town or if we're giving any direction to the town, we make sure that all those are followed for sure.
Let me just finish on this. I think Gordon.
So is there a formal process by which we can see that the conditions have been met? Either through the design documentation or the physical reconstruction?
I think it'll be a little bit of both. So anything that is in those special conditions, if in those requirements, you say we need proof of following as like after construction or anything that needs to be submitted prior to construction, like all of that can be handled on our end too, and it's just part of the contract with the contractor.
Yeah, Gordon, I would offer that, if once we get the final, we'll say 90% design set, so, more or less the town's final review before issuing the bid set, that, I can let the planning board know, and if you wanted to come in and review the plans, that'd be certainly something we could accommodate.
So I think this is a little different than, say, cell signaling, whereas cell signaling, we have a third party working on our behalf, given the technical nature of the project, and we may have a performance bond to ensure that the what was represented to us is in fact constructed, or that often it's sufficient value to finish it as it was proposed, if that's what's needed. So that's one of the, I mean, that's another topic, but it's this is a little different because it's the town. So, Laura.
I think we're also talking about the detailing of
Right.
the project. Cell signaling, we're looking at a much
Much
harder
bigger.
impact
Right.
to the town. This is
Right.
really getting down to the levels of the construction details.
Yeah.
Right.
And getting those right, which I think, I'm comfortable if Nate is looking out for, knows where we need architectural landscape site elements to be detailed, and if we come in at, not quite 100% of the CDs and have a chance to page turn.
90% CD would show us what we need to see.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the board?
Yeah.
Chris?
So does the building inspector actually issue a building permit for this?
Presume so.
Should.
So is that another level of
Yeah.
review?
But that's just for compliance with codes, right?
Well, he has
Building
to,
inspector doesn't, doesn't-
he'll look at anything that, any of our conditions, he'll
That's true.
take into effect.
Mary.
So I wasn't able to be here at last meeting, but I watched the video in its entirety. Just an overarching question that Have the numbers been run? I know you're raising it, I believe you said for 100-year storm, correct me if I'm wrong, but the rotunda would actually only last 50 years, is that correct?
I think for design purposes, we have it set for what the materials can handle. So that 50-year lifespan. It's like the rotunda that's there has been in place for a lot longer too. So we give it 50 years. That's standard for wood and timber elements, but that's not always the case. Most of the time, it lasts a while longer. So I think as part of this like phasing approach to using steel elements allows us to come back in the future too if we town decides to raise the rotunda again with the changes in sea level rise. So that's why that bottom section is made of steel, and then the top section, the rotunda, is matching the existing conditions that are out there to show the like the historic rotunda elements.
If I could add to that just a little, I'm sorry to jump in, Jeremy Packard with Full. Ben, that was a good answer, but I just want to clarify a little more. It's the difference between service life and design storm, right? So it's designed for the 100-year storm and all the elements you would see during that, the wind and the waves. But as Ben mentioned, the materials have what we call 50-year service life, right? So someone can expect to need to do some major rehabilitation at that 50-year mark, even though it is designed for a 100-year storm.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if there was options discussed with, for aesthetic reasons and cost and everything else, that if the actual rotunda starts to rot or whatever the term may be after 50 years, why at this point are we building for the 100-year storm if we could perhaps phase it with raising it up?
So I think I would defer that question to the select board. That was, pretty thoroughly vetted and discussed with the select board. We went through with, I believe, 4 design options, and the select board chose to raise it in place up to the 5 feet.
Okay, so they would have the cost analysis and all of that.
Yep, and that's online. It's on the I believe there's there's a link on the homepage that brings you to the analysis that was done.
Okay, thank you.
Anne?
For what little it's worth, the rotunda has been significantly repaired in the 35 years that I've been twice. So it's a question of wood near water. My other point, if I may, is do you have something specific saying that the junction of the ramp to the floats and the ramp of the rotunda will be redone in the following the model of the rest of the railings and architecture? Because it's currently a very temporary structure.
Yeah, I think that's our intent, is to not have the temporary,
I just
we want to
wondered
make
if
sure
that
that
was
that's the
something that
language, yeah.
needed to be made.
I can add that
Yeah.
to a condition. So that's the top of the ramp where turns left off the rotunda, and there's a wooden section that looks like a repair. So I'll say something like the wooden section at the top of the ramp shall be repaired.
Replaced
With the
historic.
historic.
It seems like photographing this extensively before it's dismantled would be important. Okay, any other comments from the public on the Tux Point? Yes, Dean.
Yes, hi, Dean Nahadas from 48 Beach Street. I had a couple of questions. I guess the first one is that there's a link to these plans somewhere, the 60% complete, or is it just the analysis, the study?
I believe there's a link to our packet. today, the last meeting, which has all of the applications. And
Okay,
I can double check right now while we're looking.
because I would like to get a copy of that if I could. I'll pick it up at the town hall or if it can email it. But a couple of things in reviewing the study, we've since gotten new guidance that to design for a 2-foot sea level rise by the year 2100. And I know a 2-foot sea level rise, and we also want to increase the freeboard on the existing. But
Can you just repeat that, because you kind of faded out?
the current guidance is to plan for a 2-foot sea level rise by the year 2100. And we also, so you want to raise it at least that, and then you want to increase the freeboard maybe from what it is now another foot. I'm seeing about 3 foot would get us through the year 2100. But I don't know if that 5-foot edict was just something the selectmen came up with, or whether there was some engineering background, because I think mitigating this height is key to the aesthetic success. So that was the one question. Can we reduce it? The study also, the future cost estimate, for raising it in 2 phases, that future costs seem to be very conservative or aggressive. And I'm wondering if it included reusing the existing piles or replacing the piles again. That was one question. And the second is the escalation relative, because costs 10 years from now will go up 20%, but also the tax rate, all the other costs are going to go up too. So it's relative, so a $30 million project today might cost $40 million in 20 years, but we'll have made that much more money, in that time due to our own inflation. So that was the second point, and that may have skewed whether to do this in 2 phases. And because if you mitigate any foot you can reduce on raising this is going to save money now on the ramp stuff. Because I'm not sure if the ramp is going to be sloped up or extended out and stay level, or if it's a combination of both. So those are the 3 things that I had questioned. And the bottom line, I want to caution, I would be more mindful of the visual impacts than the cost on how much to raise this thing.
Okay, can I take up both to respond to how the mitigation height for phase 1 was selected?
Yeah, I can speak to the height a bit. As Pete had mentioned, you do have a sea level rise, a substantial sea level rise with current models, depending on which one you look at, through 2100. And so what I think missed there in the calculations about the 2 feet plus the freeboard is, with a greater water depth, you have the ability to support a greater wave height too, right? So you have that still water that rises, but then you have a larger wave that supports coming through. And the idea is to give the bottom of those stringers some freeboard from the crest of that increased wave height, right? So it's not just strictly a 1-to-1. There is coastal analysis that goes into that to make sure we get up above that 100-year wave crest.
Okay. So, all right. Well,
I'm just gonna let him, hold on, let's let him answer your other question, which was I think you've explained this before, but the phase 2, his question was, are we gonna redo pilings, or are we gonna add to the existing pilings?
I'm gonna turn that one over to Ben, who's doing a lot of the estimating work.
Yeah, so we, with them being steel piles, the initial design was to extend those existing piles up. So you'll have the same loading capacity, and you'll be able to get that height elevation. So it'd be stripping back, installing the pile extensions, and then installing existing steel structure again with a timber facade and the railings and all of that to match kind of what's existing there.
Okay, so we are gonna reuse the piles that we're gonna put in.
Yeah, they won't be new piles. They'll just
Yeah.
be pile extensions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, again, I just wanted to caution that, sometimes, and I'm on the finance committee, and I'm saying costs aren't as big an issue as the visual impact here. So, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? And I did look, there is a, there are some renderings on the, if you Google Manchester by the Sea Rotunda, there's a quite extensive, page that has some images. Any other
Great.
comments? Okay, on this one, are we ready to close the public hearing? Any object to closing?
Okay, well, I'll move that we close the public
Public
hearing.
hearing for the Tux Point
Next point.
Public Dock Facility.
Second.
Okay, take a roll call vote. Laura,
Yes.
Peter? Yes. Sue?
Yes.
Sarah votes yes.
Yes.
Gordon? Mary?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So we close that public hearing. What we will do is Mark will come up with some draft conditions and then we'll finalize the permit. Okay, we're gonna jump now to the Morse Pier Fisherman's Dock. I think we'll take them together. Together, if you don't mind, and the Reed Park Floating Dock Extension. Additional new information from both or Brian or Nate or anybody.
Yeah, so Jeremy Packard again with both. We following the last meeting, we spoke about the arborist request. And what has been accepted on past projects, and we'd like to work into the condition on this one, is that we consult with and have the town arborist on site. I understand that Manchester does have a town arborist that I think is associated with the DPW. And so he would be on site during the excavation of that utility trench through Reed Park, and kind of directing us in real time and making evaluations as to make sure that the health of those two trees in the park are maintained, both during construction and that it is viable following construction, and we're not going to have any effect on the health of those trees. So that is a condition that we are, that we expect to be worked into this, and we hope that is amenable to the board as far as the arborist request. And beyond that, there are no changes to the proposed projects at this time.
Okay. Other questions or thoughts from the board? Mary?
My first question is just kind of process. The public hearing has for Reed Park, section 28 under chapter 91. I know for Morse Pier, it's section 18 as per our bylaws. So I'm wondering why we're referencing section 28, which is a whole different section in chapter 91. It's to do with like Connecticut waters or something.
Both, do you have a comment on? So
Yeah, so I mean, both projects would be licensed and authorized to the same kind of avenues, right? So we have obviously the planning board hearing that we're at for both of these now. That we have notice of intent process for both. Morse Pier has already been through that. Reed Park, we have a MEPA filing that just went in. That'll be in the environmental monitor this week. Following that MEPA filing, again, they're all MEPA is the only one that's unique to Reed Park. And then but both Morse and Reed, notice of intent, chapter 91, and Army Corps authorizations for all of those.
So they should be both section 18.
the project overview says section 18. of both of them.
I'm just concerned that our public hearing says 28 and it's 18. So I just we need clarification, if our posting is incorrect.
Hi, sorry, I'm Fiona Vardy with Foth. I'm double checking, but it may have been a typo. I'm looking into it and I will get back to you in a second.
Okay.
Should I ask my other questions or?
Absolutely.
So again, I wasn't able to be here, but I listened to the meeting. So I didn't see in the meeting packet if we have Concom's order of conditions that we can look at. Do we have that anywhere?
We do have the order from Morse, not for Reed.
Okay, is it possible for us to get a copy of that?
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
I know it was raised at last meeting and I would reiterate that it's important to get some sort of financial impact analysis, cost benefit analysis. I know there was numbers thrown out that, I know the harbor master said, you know, trying to raise money for dredging and things like that. So I think if we could get some solid numbers on that, that would be great. I know it was mentioned at the last meeting. I think it would also be helpful if we could get what grants, and I don't know if this is from you guys or who it's from, but what grants are anticipated for these projects and if they're linked to the MBTA 40A housing or not. And if we could get a cost, I didn't see any costs in the applications. Do we have a cost breakdown of kind of flow, how much the project would cost? And then potentially what the taxpayer burden would be for these projects?
We do have construction cost estimates for both, yeah.
That'd be great. And then,
Are they in our submission or not?
I didn't.
I don't believe they're included in the submission, no.
I know that it was asked at the meeting that if we could get a rendering of the visual of how it would look from downtown with these added pilings, et cetera. And then in the, and I'd have to look up quickly, I forget if it was the Morse or the Reed Park. It said that there would be unsightly components of the development, but then it states that the project does not provide landscaping. So how is the town to proceed with, I guess, first of all, what are the unsightly components? And then is that cost on the town to landscape to cover?
No, the unsightly components is referring to during construction, right? There's machines, there's you know, pile driving barges, that kind of stuff. There's work going on at the time during the actual installation. These being floating dock projects, there's no landscaping. I mean, the grass in Reed Park could be restored following the you know, the utility trenching. That would all be restored, reseeded. There's existing irrigation. We could even sod that just to make sure that's like instant gratification. But beyond that, it's, you know, it's all a water-based project and really nothing to be seen following construction except the final work.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I didn't know if it referenced to the pump out, you know, area or anything like that. If that's unsightly, I don't know. I'm not a builder.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. Can you please repeat your question about the section for chapter 91? I'm seeing in our applications, we did include section 18, so I'm just curious if it was part of the public notice that the planning board published.
Yeah, so it's I'm sorry, it's the planning board notice, public hearing notice.
I think
may
the
be-
planning board may publish that.
Yeah, that's probably on our end. And I did want to just note that you reference our zoning bylaws from our old bylaws. The zoning bylaw, I think you referenced 4.1.10J, and the new bylaw is wait, I think I have it. It's 4.2 F1.
Is there a substantive change, just other than numbering?
No, it references our use table. And I did have an overall question, not for the consultants, but our use table, and I think actually the application references a special permit. And I was looking for clarity because I thought chapter 91 was just looking for recommendations from the planning board. Are we doing
I
a
think we
special
looked into
permit?
that, it's special.
Yeah, so our local bylaw requires the special permit. It has nothing to do with chapter 91.
Okay, because our
It's a
use
local
table
requirement.
says comments from the planning board.
Right.
Well,
There's,
they ask for comments, but in addition to that, most towns don't have this requirement that you have to go through the planning board to install docks or do any work in the intertidal zone. So because we do, it is required for these applications to come to the planning board. So, but that's a local requirement, not state requirement.
Okay, so, Mary's raised reiterated a couple things that have come up a couple times. So before we ask that, we should get a consensus about whether we think that these are things that we should have. One was the rendering, one was the, financial analysis, one is grants anticipated, and construction costs. Before we weigh in on that, because I think we have to make sure we have a consensus that we want to ask the applicant to do that rather than just one of us asking for that. I did talk with Sarah Melish, Chair of the Finance Committee, about whether they had weighed in on this. And I believe that they were approached before the application went to us. And they did have a detailed discussion about that, and they, her recollection in a conversation, which might be, she was gonna clarify and then write us a letter. So, was that they had reviewed both of them, and that Reed Park they were in favor of, and they kind of withheld endorsement on the Morse Pier. So, they have looked at it, but she thought that it would be good to update the financial analysis and have a FinCom weigh in on it. So that was her opinion. That doesn't have to be our opinion. So and I'm gonna take a comment from Dean because he's on the FinCom. Unless is that a holdover from your prior? Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted, Dean.
There we go. At the finance committee, we discussed whether to go after the funding, the planning stage. We didn't really discuss any concrete project, to my knowledge. I mean, there's been a bunch of versions, but nothing official. I mean, there was a version to go along the railroad tracks and put a pump out station. There was a version to go around the front over to the fish pier. But it was all just, I mean, I didn't approve it, but the board, I was a dissenter, but we approved to go forward with the study.
Okay, great.
Sarah, can I just clarify one of your things you're gonna ask? I wasn't asking for the cost of for the project, I mean, for the construction cost. I was asking for the cost of the project. So if the project is, I'm just making up numbers, if the project is 3 million, we get a grant for 1 million, and the taxpayers, what's the net for the taxpayers? If there is any.
Yeah.
So the engineering estimate for Cushman facility, the original one was $580,000. The grant opportunity for that, since we received a grant for the engineering permitting, would be 80% of that cost in Seaport Economics. So 80% of that, whatever the total amount's going to be, 580,000, less or more, will come from Seaport with caveat.
So, and then the 20% is
That's the tax share.
taxpayers. Okay, and then what about Reed Park?
Reed Park's 100% funded through a state and
Okay,
So I'm just curious, because we've had this conversation a couple of times now about the financial analysis. Is something in writing somewhere that defines that, and just so that we can see it? I mean, it's just, not that I mean, I know you've been working on this for a long time, but I just think it's helpful if there is documentation as to what those numbers are.
So, as far as financial analysis, I'm not really sure exactly what analysis you're looking for, whether or not it's paid for itself, whether or not what the funding is for, I don't know.
Right, so sorry to interrupt, but if I
No,
could, so for personally, it would just be documentation of what the grant covers for the Morse Pier, and then what the grant covers for the Reeds. And then also, you had mentioned that there is significant revenue generating implications from the Reed Park Pier. And it would be nice if we talked about whether you could possibly provide a projection as to what that might be.
Yeah, I actually had that, and I've documented and published that
Okay,
in my newsletter and then into Cricket. So I can forward it to all of you. with those
Yeah, I think
projections.
if it's, especially if it's exists,
If
let's
it's done,
put it in
yeah,
as
yeah.
part of the application, that would be great.
Let's go.
And then I think, we should pass, as soon as we get it, we should just pass it to the FinCom. They're supposed, they are, and if they have comments about, the financial analysis is one of the criteria of a special permit. And, the applications are, sort of have a narrative. So that's I would agree, that's a summary of the first cost, the operating upside, downside, and maintenance costs
Yeah.
stuff would be helpful so that people understand, what
the
are,
risk,
yeah.
if there is risk, yeah.
And I do think that it's important that we're gonna need those numbers anyway, as we think about, the, MBTA zoning, upsides, downsides. So that would be helpful for that too.
Well, the MBTA, if the town and the state don't come to a point, all of the state funding for all three projects, there'll be no $1 million for tucks, there'll be no 80% for the fisheries facility, and we're already spending state money to buy materials to build floats. So
Okay, so is there agreement among the board that a financial summary would be an addendum to to these applications would be helpful? Is any objections to that? Okay,
Can I
great.
just add on to that or ask the question?
Go ahead.
Do you, is it a sort of economies of scale for how many floating docks or docks that you have for how many employees you need? So if you add 22 docks, does that increase the need for?
I would say on busy days, we need, rather than on a weekend, busy day, I'll have 3 people. It'll be a morning, a swim shift, and afternoon. Depending on how that builds out, we may need a swim shift person more days a week. Not Monday, Tuesday, but rather than just Saturday, Sunday, maybe Thursday through Sunday or Wednesday.
So
The
could that
business will
just be-
dictate that.
Could I?
Yeah.
Could something along those lines be added to
Operating
the
costs.
analysis for financial?
Okay, I have a couple other questions, but go ahead, Laura.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit, but given that this is on the water, it's a little bit unusual for us as a planning board to look at. So, from the point of, stakeholders, whether that be the Harbor Management Plan Advisory Group or perhaps a commercial fleet, other, boating associations, if there were letters of support, say, from any of those groups, I think that would help us, kind of weigh the benefits of it. Even, this might sound a little odd at first, but even the Bike and Ped Committee might weigh in on this because in the point of view of activating downtown, and we're talking about an accessible route out onto the docks, this could be a real, public benefit. So that was my first comment, was that, maybe this application could be strengthened by having some you know, some support from various stakeholder groups, voters and beyond. The second one, which really gets to the Chapter 91 public benefit, I can certainly see how it's serving voters and serving non-voters, and I think it's important that the non-voters benefits of this plan be given, you know, kind of equal weight. So making the route accessible. We talked about the potential of adding some bump outs where, you know, people might sit, and I think that that those benefits there need to be no cost benefits for people to come and enjoy the piers, not just the recreational boaters tying up to it. That's a great benefit for boaters, but you know that it needs to serve everybody, and then there shouldn't be a cost associated with to the users of that. So I would want to make a condition, some conditions on the kind of no cost public non-boater benefits to the docks. And the last thing, just a response to the arborist, I'm fine with the town arborist reviewing the route for the utility trenching. I do think, given that we have 2 high-value mature trees on that site, that if the town arborist feels that an independent arborist be on site during that trenching itself with an air spade and any appropriate tools to actually do some work to preserve the health of those trees, that would be a condition of the work as well. Thank you.
Other comments from others? Questions? I have a couple. One is for both. Did you consider the area of the, I'm going to share my screen. I have this one here. The area here, this area here. I don't know if you can see that. Is there any possibility of not using piles for that area? Pulling it earlier in the season, if it's storm, you know, if storms are coming, kind of thing. And in order to, or potentially to not have piles at the ends of those piers. I guess the larger question is there a way to reduce the additional piers, particularly in the view quarter?
Yeah, and I know the piles are a contentious issue out here in the Inner Harbor, given the view. And we really did everything we could to try to minimize the number that we're proposing already, right? That was done in the preliminary design stage before we even approached you know, any regulators or committees. The problem that with like bottom anchors is you always have some, just the nature of the hardware, you have some degree of wiggle room there, right? And these floats are all placed fairly precisely to provide serviceability as well as clearance from the mud line, you know, to meet regulatory requirements. And then also you have this significant tide swing here, right? Not even include, I mean, just on a regular sunny day tide, you know, you've got 9-foot tides up here. And then if you add in any kind of storm surge, right, like we're able to account for, you know, tides and storm surges and what that elevation is with the pile cutoff elevation. So if, you know, if there's a storm surge that comes in and everything raises and they're still held right in place at the top of those piles. The problem you have with the bottom anchors is that you have to build that room for those floats to move into the pile hardware itself, which just introduces more, you know, more wiggle room for a lack of a better term. And so given the location and the proximity to the shoreline and offset from the mud line, bottom anchors are really not a feasible option in this area.
So how is it that just that we, until 5 years ago, Tux Point had bottom anchors, the boat club has bottom anchors, the existing Fisherman's Pier has bottom anchors, the yacht club has bottom anchors. So why this big switch to the piers?
Well, to be honest, I mean, regulatory review and regulations in general have gotten a lot tighter, right? So you used to see you know, in eelgrass beds, you would see these bottom anchors. And if you looked in an aerial view, you would see kind of that radius around each mooring or around each float or whatever it was. And that's from the hardware just kind of dragging around in that, you know, dragging the substrate. And so over time, you know, engineering improves, we've recognized the impacts we're having on the environment. You know, regulatory gets a little tighter. And these are all reasons why things are kind of moving more to a pile supported structure rather than these loose bottom anchors. As far as the ones at Tux Point, I can't speak to some of those other locations, but they don't have the proximity to the shoreline in some cases that these ones do. I mean, these ones are I'm not going to say thread of the needle, but it's, you know, we really did what we could to maximize the available water sheet and reduce congestion and all that stuff that we had talked about at the first meeting. You know, so I can't speak to exactly those other sites you're talking about, but I do know that we've kind of gotten away from bottom anchors in most applications.
Okay. Brian, did you have anything additional
I would say Tux, when that failed, it was a non-compliant facility. We had to get permitted for that. You couldn't drive wood pilings there. They didn't go deep enough to support those floats and to support that ramp. You can't have a bottom moored float system. The ramp like that, the ramp would be, we lose it every year because of the movement, the stress, and strain. But so steel pilings, you know, wood to me is a lot better, but you can't put wood pilings into bedrock. We had to go with rock socket pilings choice. Pilings at Reed Park. Again, the proximity to the shoreline, the movement of a facility when it's on bottom moored system, the number of feet that it would move in and out of compliance with distance from the substrate. And I frankly wouldn't want to have 300 feet of boats tied up to floats on a windy day out of the south because they'd all be up on the shore near the railroad tracks.
Yeah, I'm only asking about the connector between the commercial and the, which seems to me as a walkway, it could be shut if there's, you know, that's the section as well as the ends of the commercial. So
there's when you have a fixed and a fixed, or a fixed, you don't attach. The only way you attach the bottom moored float systems would be if there were significant distance in between the two. Then you would have a ramp of some sort that could move pivot. That would be the only way you could do it. You can't have the movement because those floats will hit against the piling system and against the boats that are on the floats on the piling system. They don't mix and match.
Okay, my second, do you have another problem? My other question is about, you mentioned that the area I just pulled up on the screen is going to be reserved for commercial vessels. What's a commercial vessel?
Well, according to our rules and regulations, fishing, lobster boats, vessels engaged in fisheries, the standard for us is that if you have to have a federal or state commercial fishing permit, and you have to be able to show landing tickets, which are proof that you are catching fish, landing, and paying taxes on what you earn.
So what about, so we know that there's also commercial vessels are those that service moorings, and that's important for the harbor. What if I want to convert my commercial fishing boat to a commercial deep sea fishing where I'm going to bring 10 people in who are going to park, and then I take them out deep sea fishing or whale watching? That would be a commercial use, right? So my point is that the assertion that there isn't parking, we're not bringing in parking burden to the town in the future. It's hard to know that for sure, right?
It absolutely, it's not. They can certainly put in there restrict fisheries that are allowed to use that facility.
So they're allowed to use it, and then as long as they keep a commercial registration, regardless of whether they're
Commercial
fishing or whether.
Commercial fishing license.
So that dock is for commercial fishing, or I guess.
Morris Pier Fisherman's Facility.
So then the scenario that Sarah just suggested could not happen. The deep sea fishing.
Right, so you couldn't have whale watch boats.
Could have deep sea fishing.
Right. And that could be in order, one addition to set.
Yeah, I guess on the positive side, if you think that's a good use of the harbor and brings people to access to the harbor, then it's a good thing. I mean, it kind of depends on, it's an unknown to me, and that's always a challenge. Okay. Mary, could you, another question?
So we never resolved, even after your questions, I think it is very important to get a visual rendering of these additional pilings so residents and the board can understand. And then I think it was mentioned at last meeting, but I would reiterate that I don't know how long it's going to take for the harbor management plan to come into effect, but I think perhaps we should consider some of these decisions should wait until a harbor management plan is in place. If we're talking about deep sea fishing boats, et cetera, it kind of seems like a change of use of the harbor, and an expansion of the harbor that maybe we haven't really thought out yet.
So as far as renderings go, there was no money ever in the budget, and the grant that I wrote, money approved by CDC for the engineering program. So there is no money for that. If the planning board can identify some money, I can't come out of the harbor budget. I'm sure I don't have any funding for that.
So what's the board's feeling about a rendering?
Rendering is always important, just so you can see it.
Yeah, it should be right. What's it cost? Any idea what it would cost to create one of this?
I think it would be. Let me ask a different question and then I know we haven't resolved that one. But if we were to permit this with, or give it the green light and ask you to take out the pilings at the Fisherman's Pier in the plan, would the plan be able to move forward and accomplish the goals for the commercial fishermen? And qualify for the funding and all the rest? Or is it a debt? Are the piers an essential, without piers, there's no project for the commercial, not Reed Park, the Morse Pier piece.
Or you lose the piles, you lose the floats. So, yeah, I mean, each pile removed would reduce the proposed float length.
In the Morse Pier proposal.
Yes.
Sarah, can I ask you, you brought up a very good point about that one section of pier, can it be eliminated? I'm not sure everybody knows which section of the pier you're talking about.
Sure.
Because in so doing, then we eliminate all the piles associated with it, correct?
Well, there are a lot of piles. There's how many here along this section?
That's 3 along that section before it turns the corner.
And then there's 3 on this corner, 2 or 3 on this corner, right?
Yep, just because we had to make those corners. Yep. It's actually the same, it's the same pile spacing as the existing Reed Park floats. So the ones to the north there, it's the same, it's essentially the same spacing except when you're making those corners.
But then there's a pile at the end of each of these fingers that doesn't exist today.
Correct, yep.
And then these piles at on the mud side of the
Land side, yeah, sure.
land side, thank you, more technical term. Um, so I was wondering about this section here to try to kind of find a middle ground. So when you stand there at low tide, there's a lot going on. And I asked myself and was unable to convince myself either way, whether the piles would be, you know, an eyesore or whether you'd see right straight through them. Because there's an awful lot going on there.
A lot of visual.
There's a lot of visual
activity
stuff
there.
already going on. You got boats and you got floats and you got a distant view. And so I haven't, and a rendering can capture it either way, right? It's
First, the rendering, are you gonna show the rendering with boats tied up there, which is how you see it?
Yeah.
Or with just the piles?
Yeah, the boat's tied up.
I think you're gonna see it both ways. All winter long, you're gonna see it with only one or two boats.
So you think you need an artist, not a renderer to, I mean, that's gonna be a complicated rendering. I
No,
would
but
think.
that's a good point too, Chris, because if a commercial boat is tied up in that spot we're talking about right now, what the height of that is probably higher than pylons.
Mhm. It's true.
Yeah, high tide.
So, I mean,
That's true.
you're not gonna be able to see the harbor in that case.
Yeah, but actually in the winter is when you're gonna see the pilings and only a few boats, so.
Or would people prefer seeing the boats or the harbor? I mean, the boats are attractive also, but
Right. Laura,
If the town can find a way to assist with the rendering, I think that's a good idea to help people understand. I personally want to be careful that we don't try to engineer this ourselves, but we look to the experts here. And I think we gave them the design intent, which is minimize the pilings. I believe we talked about wood pilings on this dock, is that right?
The wood pile.
These are wood pilings, so
Yes.
they're not gonna look like the kind of modern steel pilings. It is gonna have that sort of, I don't know if you wanna call that quainter, but you know, it's got a more traditional look perhaps to the piles. So I would say if the intent is to have a boardwalk that meets in the middle and then you can walk across it, that by not meeting in the middle, you've really lost that public benefit. Now you're just kind of dead ending everywhere and you haven't provided the potential for people to, you know, move from one park to the other, to just stroll along, activate the waterfront, look at the boats, perhaps provide a bump out. So I would advocate for helping Brian find a way to render, you know, picking the right view, whether that be from the street or from Mascanoma Park, sort of, you know, an angled view. I think that would help everybody understand, but I would say, let the experts tell us what pilings are needed, and they've already told us they're minimizing it, so I think the intent is there.
both, can you give us at least a estimate of some sort of a visualization? And then maybe we can use some of the planning money, or if we, depending on the amount, I don't know, we can think about whether we might do that.
Yeah, sure. We can give that.
And then
Just
you can give us something simple, but edit.
just so I could, just to help me dial in that estimate a little bit, we're talking about one perspective from Beach Street, or is it two perspectives? One from Beach, one from Mascanoma?
I think one from beach personally.
That was my, I mean, I agree, but
Yeah, I think that's sufficient.
and then you're looking out to the whole harbor. You know, you can see Reed Park to your right, Morse to the left. So one perspective from Beach Street when you're standing on the bridge, and then what versions do you want? Are you looking for like a no build, a build?
We know what no build look, we know what the
Yeah,
existing
it's,
conditions look like. We can.
No. You're right.
That's
That's the way we walk to alternatives. So that's just the way my brain works. All right. So
Right.
no build, right? Because you can see that obviously existing. But then do you want the one with boats, one without boats? And then one.
The boats is like, we only need one, right?
Yeah, I think one-
With some boats and.
Yeah, one with
whatever the
boats
right
and-
tide.
Just a very high level. I mean, I think you could take a iPhone photo and kind of, we're not looking for a,
Microsoft Paint this thing? I can do that for $100.
okay. I want to just do a couple quick things. Any other comments from the board? Laura?
I meant to say before, if there's a concern about, you know, number and location of piles now and number of and location of proposed. We could also just ask for a plan view that says, that points out the piles.
I
Existing
think
and
we have
proposed.
that in our.
Do we have that?
documents.
Okay.
If you could give us that plan view and make those red or something.
Yes,
so
some way
so
that
the-
you can distinguish
Yeah,
any
that is-
change.
you have to kind of go hunting for them. What?
Makes it offensive, big and red.
Okay, I see Sarah Pierce, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you. Sarah Pierce, 9 Friend Street. I had a couple questions. One, Laura Tenney was mentioning some bump outs, and I just wondered if she could explain that more, what she meant by a bump out. Is that something, how is that built? Was it made of?
Sarah, this is Bonnie, the harbor master. If you were to go down to Reed Park today, you'd see a float with a tent that meets a new top on it. And that is, we put that there so the staff could have shade and a place to sit while they're working. And what has happened is it's become a very popular destination for people to go down and sit and coffee and look out the harbor. We'll show up and sometimes there'll be 3 people sitting down there having coffee in the morning, or folks tell me they'll go down in the evening and sit there after the staff is gone. So one of the things that was suggested was that as part of the project going down toward the drawbridge, that we put in a couple of these. They don't need to be that big. They could literally be 1/3 the size of that, one of the benches that we have, representative of the bench that we have on the current float going down, because it's such a lovely place to go and sit and look out over the harbor.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And then I just had one more question. When you talk about commercial boats or vessels, I'm 100% supportive of the commercial fisherman industry. I just wondered, outside of fishing boats, commercial is a broad term. What is the largest, is there like a set limit on what size boats you allow to come into the harbor or that can come into the harbor? Because I guess
Well,
I'm wondering, yeah.
There isn't a size limit vessel that can come into the harbor. There's a size limit that can swing on a mooring. Then as far as length goes, 60 feet is the maximum allowed at Reed Park for docking. There wouldn't be a space for 60-foot lobster boat or fishing boat at the proposed facility.
Great.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of outside of fishing. Like I know, and I know I asked this a while ago, but I didn't get a clear answer. Since we have so much involvement with the MBTA, there is an MBTA ferry that has a stop in Lynn, which is pretty much close to us. I just wondered if there was any.
No.
So in order to do that, we would have to have a completely re-engineered facility for that ferry to land at.
Okay.
We wouldn't be allowed to bring in a commercial ferry of that nature, nor would we want to. It's not appropriate. The harbor isn't one of those harbors.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you for answering that question.
Sure.
Thank you, Sarah. Dean, do you have another question?
Yes,
Comment?
so the comments on these 2 projects are, has there been a historical analysis done on the parks and the whole corridor? Like, I'm gonna read it because I'm not good at public speaking. Has any kind of historical analysis been done to determine adverse effects and how best to mitigate them? That side of Beach Street, from the train tracks to Old Neck Road, including Reed Harbor, Reed Park, the harbor in Masconomo, is a well-preserved example of the City Beautiful movement applied to civic projects of the 20th century. The design was greatly influenced, if not done, by Frederick Law Olmsted, and the railroad bridge is an overhead trunnion bascule designed by Joseph Strauss before he moved on to do the Golden Gate Bridge. This section of town might be earmarked to preserve the beginning of the 20th century, much like the town common area preserves the beginning of the 19th century. So that's the first thing, is what are we doing messing with this historical relic? The second thing, right now, Reed Park, most of the year, there's a lot of vacant dock space. And has anyone compared the visual costs of this work versus the benefits? Just about every real estate brochure references a scenic harbor, and changing this image may adversely impact our property values. Do we need to build all these new transient boater docks for 5 weekends per year, which is about when the current one is full? The docks only seem to fill up during good beach weather when the town businesses are already slammed, so there really isn't any added business. You know, if it was during a rainy day, that would be helpful, but when it's sunny and all the boats are there, people are also at the beach. So the slips, so one thing is I'm saying, why develop at all? If you're going to develop, though, that slip space would be better served for those on the mooring waiting list. The grant provisions don't allow for this at Reed Park, but I want to make sure that that same mistake doesn't happen again, where, you know, our biggest need are boaters on the waiting list, but we're expanding all this commercial area, and it seems like we're bumping the people who have been paying money to wait on the waiting list. Let's see. Right now, the new moorings are being located out in Manchester Bay, where they say pull your boat if a storm is coming, but there could be new moorings to serve our residents in well-protected harbor if we get the town out of the marina business. The taxpayers do not see any income from this, as the overhead is too high and the season is too short. I strongly believe that we are better off funding any dredging the same way we always have, through grants and savings. And then the last thing is accountability. I mean, Bion is retiring soon, and shouldn't we wait until a new harbor master is on board so that there'll be more accountability for such a wild endeavor? Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think we've kind of raised these issues. We've raised the historic, I think, as a new idea, which is useful. We've talked about the visual and we're going to ask for financial analysis. So,
If I could speak to the historic piece.
Yeah, the historic piece is helpful, and I think a new idea that we should just ponder.
So the projects don't impact any, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off.
I think we can take those as comments right now we're not gonna be done with that tonight. Anne, do you have something new to add?
Yes, that area from the railroad tracks at Beach Street out to and beyond Tappan has been extensively studied, both in terms of future flooding, a redesign of Masconomo Park. This is, and the necessity that will come up in the next 50 years of building some sort of berms to protect the buildings on the land side of Beach Street. So there's an enormous amount of work which has been done and which is ongoing. And compared to those things, even 30 new piles is a very small change, in my opinion.
Okay. Do you have anything new to add?
Historical. So when you're pondering the historical use of this harbor, it'd be important to note that in the second half of the 20th century, parts of this harbor had not been dredged. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was a creek. The federal government did not finish dredging this harbor until long after Masconomo Park had been designed. The nature of this harbor has changed dramatically since the late 1800s, right up through the finish of dredging in 1956. It is not the same harbor, and it will continue to evolve because nature is impacting it dramatically. And the cost of those docks down there is about $15,000 a year to staff it. We made last fiscal year $36,000. So That facility brings money that goes into the general fund. This town contributes. And the expansion to the bridge, once you see the financial analysis, is significant.
Great, thank
No
you.
matter how much it remains empty.
Anything else from the board? I think one of the questions that Laura asked earlier is, just to hear briefly from, we haven't finished the the harbor management plan is work in progress. But Carl, do you want to just speak to the harbor committee, whatever your group is called? And just briefly, Laura had asked for people who have thought a lot about the harbor to weigh in. So I think that would be useful. You mentioned this we talked about it on the site walk, but if you could just briefly.
Yeah, the Harbor
Carl
Advisory,
Doan, your address.
Carl Doan, Harbor Advisory Committee Chairman. I was on the committee 15 years ago when Ann Harrison's father ran it. And it was a different harbor back then. But everything was keyed on trying to get things paid for. Federal and the state gave the harbor 75% of the dredging fees. So it was a different harbor then, 15, 20 years ago. Things have evolved. Once the state and federal went, we didn't have any money. And I'd say 15 years ago, the town almost paid for all of the things that cost today. Tom Smalley was then on the finance committee, and I've talked to Tom many times. He is a boater from way, way back. Things were paid for because of the taxes, the boats that were here, the boats are being built, repaired, everything else. And then things evolved and took off as it has in the rest of the country. This is not just a little place where people used to come for the summer and then shut the big estates down for the winter. And it was a very quiet place. People live here year round. There is no ice. There has been the last couple of years. So that's going to open it up for more commercial fishing, more commercial things that go on in the harbor and bring things into the town. Harbor Advisory is just trying to tie things in with the rest of the town boards to keep it going, to keep the dredging going, so you could have more boats in here from townspeople. Townspeople can't get a mooring. The harbor has, under Bayern, been a great rejuvenation. He's made it so the lists are correct, that the harbor is making money. There was nothing before he came in there. And it's organized, and it's just a small harbor. We've got 600 or 700 moorings. If somebody doesn't come in and pay their dues in March, somebody else gets the mooring. It is very well regulated.
And so as your group has weighed in and feels that this is a good.
Harbor Advisory Committee, I would say 99 and 44/100 is in favor of this project.
I
Is in
won't ask you
favor
that
of the
other
funding that we
0.6
get
is.
for it.
Okay, great, thank you. I want to move, we are going to continue this public hearing. We have another hearing with Cell Signaling. So we're going to continue this to our next meeting. And I think what I'm going to do is have you guys, we'll flip it. So we'll let Cell Signaling go first next meeting, and then take you guys after Cell Signaling, just to be fair, if that's okay. Probably 8 o'clock on the 22nd. I think by the time we're gonna meet, does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah, 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock on the, so to continue the hearing, we're just about ready, Mark. On the 22nd, so I'll take a motion to continue the public hearing. We've closed the one for Tux Point. So for Reed Park and Morse Pier, for the 22nd at 8 p.m.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Okay, opposed. Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming tonight and your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll work with Mark and see if we can get some sort of visual representation.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
were you able to sign in? If you sign in to the meeting,
Sign in,
yeah, you have to go to the Manchester by the Sea calendar.
I have the link.
You have a link, okay. Just make sure you sign in without your audio.
These are, so they've got the capability to do it. These are not sophisticated at all. I'll give you a good visual idea. Did you see the file? Did you see the files over there?
I know, those are the existing files.
Yeah. Look at it. There.
It's changed, I would argue it's changed the look of, takes from the original. Anyway.
It does.
Yeah.
Extending those other little warts around it makes it. Community.
Okay. Welcome, self-signaling team. Small group.
Lots of people online.
You're wearing them down.
Many.
I saw Jacob poke his head in, oh, there he is.
And yeah, so, many of our team, would be, virtual. So.
Shall we open the public hearing?
Yes, we should open the public hearing. I'll open the public hearing for cell signaling, roll call, Mary Foley.
Yes.
Gordon.
Yeah.
Chris.
Yes.
Sarah votes yes. Sue.
Yes.
Here. Mark,
Yes.
Peter, and Laura just stepped out, but thank you. Amir, you just have to make sure you join without your, you have to more than mute. You have to actually join without your video, without your audio.
And,
A little caret by your microphone.
yeah.
Go up, push up on the caret and then pick join by phone or something like that.
Computer awesome.
Yeah, join without computer audio or something like that.
Okay, so,
Yeah, you look, you're good now. Okay, and I'll give you the screen. Great. And if any of the other of your team is gonna join, that is, I guess they're remote, they can keep their, they'll need their microphone. So, okay, Samir, go ahead, thank you. And thank you for your patience again, we did, put you first at the next meeting.
thank you.
So just to set the stage, everybody recalls that tonight we're going to be dealing with architecture, sustainability, lighting and geothermal. And the presentation will essentially establish that we are meeting and exceeding the performance standards. And so Samir Sroji is here from HGA. He's going to do the architectural presentation. And then the rest of the team who's going to deal with sustainability, geothermal and lighting are going to be virtual.
So the agenda that we put together for today is, you see on the screen. We'd like to revisit the project goals, but I think it's important to ground ourselves with what TSB asked us to do, that kind of channel what the planning board also wanted us to achieve. We'll review the architectural and building design, including materials and character, and how that meets the performance standards of the bylaws. Then we'll go into lighting and talk about site lighting primarily. And that would be presented by Tao Han, who's virtual and is a lighting designer with HTA. Then we thought we can pause and talk, take questions as a sort of, that's a good segment to pause and kind of just review together. See if there's any questions. And sustainability is a chunk of presentations that is divided into 4 pieces, and different people talk to that. Ariane Laxo, also from HTA, is the Director of Sustainability, and we'll talk about kind of the certification process and what we're trying to achieve there. She'll address carbon and what our approach to carbon reduction, both embodied carbon and use during the life of the building. Then VR+A, our MEP engineers will get into energy and how that relates to carbon reduction in the goal. And that would be Jacob Knowles, who you know, Sarah, and who else is Isabel? Yes, Isabel is maybe presenting. Yes, from VR+A on energy. And then we have a geothermal system that is designed also by HGA. Russ Weems from HGA will be presenting that, and then we'll wrap it up and ask if there's any questions. That we're good with the agenda, so we'll start. So the project goals again that we're given as designers to design to were about developing an innovation campus for the future of CST. It's consolidating their activity, but the key is to really promote their research in the field that they work in. And then the selection of the site was very specific to CST, that we wanted to kind of celebrate the unique site and restore the ecosystem. You've heard from Biohabitat last time about the approach that we're taking on that. The whole development, both site and the buildings, are meant to work towards a net zero carbon. And that's part of what we will dive into in the segment on sustainability. And of course, we take a holistic look at sustainability, including the well-being of the occupants, which is very important for both CST culturally and our firm and the project. CST is also very keen about the integration with the community and kind of being a positive force within the community, and we'll show how that happens. It's a large team, really exceptional consultants that are put together for this project to achieve all of that. In the master plan, one of the key goals that we try to achieve is the integration of the architecture and the development into the surrounding, specifically the forest around, and the reversing the damage that was done through the quarry activity on the side, and really bringing back the side, rehabilitating it to integrate with the landscape. So it's primarily organized around the loop road that comes from Atwater right here. This is the MAC. And that loop road is for both people, employees and visitors coming into the main entry and going into the garage. We are developing the site in 2 phases. Phase 1 is as shown here with the lobby, with the phase 1 garage, and they're both connected. And phase 2 garage is furthest to the east, and the building of phase 2 is on the west side. By forming this V shape on the side, we're doing a few things that are important kind of for the way the whole complex functions. There's a kind of a forecourt entry point where visitors come in, and it is also a sort of a patio where employees and staff spill out and grab their lunch. It's south facing on the upper meadow. The V shape also frames views that are amazing towards the hills to the north. And they create a what we call the upper quad, which is sort of an outdoor space that is landscape, also meant for use by the employees, that has magnificent views because it's high on the cliff. So it's really commanding views. On the lower part where we kind of meet when we go out there, kind of on the low, is what we've dubbed the quarry garden. And that is an amenity that the building also spills out onto, and there's some big landscape for employees and staff to enjoy. One of the goals that also were key in the design in the master planning is shielding of the neighbor to the north immediately, because as you saw, it's a very industrial kind of not the most desirable view. It kind of ruins the view to the hills. So we are mounting the north portion any excavation that is happening on the site to accommodate these buildings is being kind of mounded and planted, so we create a visual screen so that you're kind of looking beyond to the hills and removing the focus of the industrial visuals with a big. Sorry, this is kind of moving slow. So this is a bird's eye view from the north of both phases and how they frame the upper quad, which I'm going to right here, connected by a sort of pavilion that is glassy that becomes the main entry and also kind of the main dining area for the facility. And you see here the north portion of the loop road with the berming and the planting that I just described to the north edge, with this Brady property being in the foreground. We'll talk about the TVs that are both on the building, the lobby, and foreseen in the future for covering the whole garage complex. Again, one of the key design ideas for us was the integration into the cliff. There's the cliff, it's about 40 feet average, lower on the west side and taller on the east side. And the idea architecturally was to really cascade and integrate into the cliff. So it becomes a feature as opposed to kind of the barrier that it feels today. So this is a view from the quarry garden, looking at the cliff on the right, the lobby pavilion beyond. And here a detail of how we did the massing of the building in keeping with the performance standards of the bylaws to integrate into the landscape, into the kind of surrounding area. The cliff on one hand, of course, the forest and the vegetated area around this. One key thing I point out here is that the building is 5 stories if you look at it from this level. That makes it only 2 stories at the upper meadow. So minimizing the presence up on the upper meadow is a part of the breed. So that is why we're cascading down. And as you can see here, the cascading is actually breaking down the mass to minimize so that you don't have a 5-story wall and on any part of the complex. So the cascading is happening both to the south and to the east, breaking down the mass, making it more human scale. This is a bird's eye view from the south side. What you're seeing here in the foreground is the main drive coming in, parking, and 2 means of approach to the entry, which is the pavilion right here, one with stairs and one with maybe a compliant handicap ramps. And again, the mass, even on the 2-story element on the upper meadow, is broken down for interest and kind of connectivity to the elements that you saw on the other sides. One thing to point out too, we are screening on the roof some of the mechanical equipment that sit outside, and we're screening that with brick and some perforated metal. And that's again to visually reduce the impact of any such elements on the roof. So this is the entry view, and what I would point out on this slide is, as part of our sustainable approach, is the reduction of embodied carbon, and the structure in the lobby will be mass timber, which is the lowest embodied carbon material we can use. Ariane and others will talk about additional approaches to the reduction of embodied carbon. There were some questions about lighting in the lobby and spill out from the lobby. And I mentioned it to people as we were walking around the site the other time, and I'll mention it again, and we'll show an animation of how we're convinced, per our question from our client CSD, are we minimizing the impact of the development on 128? And we're convinced that we are, completely, including any potential view of lights emanating from the lot. And with that, I'll show an animation that we have. I'm gonna stop sharing and reshare just to make that video move better. I think there's an option. Maybe I don't have that option here. I do not. So I'm gonna share again and go to.
Part of one screen.
But there's no audio associated with this. So here's the view from 128. We start by looking at a bird's eye view. It's moving slow, so I'll slow my commentary. And it slowly kind of pans down. Of course, the bird's eye view is not realistic. Just that actually the video is very smooth on my screen and very choppy when I share it. But maybe I can turn my screen around at least for the board and see it in a much better. Typically, Zoom has this feature to optimize for video sharing. I don't know if anybody knows technically if there is something that I can do to make that happen. If not, maybe I can just.
Maybe you could send us a link where we could see it.
We can do that as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, we did that animation to be convinced ourselves and convince our client that we meet the requirements they gave us, which is to minimize the presence visually of any of the development, and that's kind of our way of doing that. In our package to the board, we submitted the required elevations in black and white of all sides of the building, both phase 1 and phase 2. Here we show only a rendered version of that, which illustrates way better the kind of the materiality of what we're proposing. Like I said, we're trying to connect to the surrounding, with one of them being kind of the cliff, and we're using granite. And we're trying to pick granite that is a Cape Ann granite that has a little bit of rose color, because the cliff actually is granite that is not the gray that we're familiar with. It maybe here you see it in town, some of the old buildings, and there's more of a rose buff tone to the granite. So we're selecting that material, and that occurs here in the stepping and a sort of a water table all around the base of the building. In addition, we're using brick in a Norman scale, a brick module in 2 tones. One is gray, similar and blends with the granite, and the other is again a range of buff tones that really blend and are soft, a very natural color. And everything you see here, including the penthouse, the kind of mechanical level, will be clad in brick and articulated with detail. And we're selecting a color that is a copper tone to highlight some architectural elements within the building that are important to kind of tie it all together. You see those here with these vertical elements and some copings that go around the building. So that's kind of on high level, the different materials. Of course, we have glass, quite a bit of it in the lobby and in certain areas, and that's really to link nature to inside and use outside, bring daylight in. And a lot of that glass in specific areas will be bird safe. And actually, one thing that is really of note, CSD elected to use a new technology in glass called VIG, which is vacuum insulated glass. That is used a lot in Europe, but it's new here in the country. And that has the equivalent insulated rating as a 6-inch stud wall. So we're very excited about that. And that is, again, will tie into the conversations that will come next on sustainability. And we're making the envelope so tight so that energy is reduced through any loss of thermal loss through that. So here's examples of these types of materials coming together. This is the kind of mix of Cape Ann type granite that has those tones that I've described. Pictures of the brick. This is kind of the inspiration from a Boston building. And here's the same brick that is being proposed, used on a building live. And this idea of using copper and a copper tone aluminum is something that we've done on a different project that you're seeing right here. So all of these, we feel, come together to really integrate into the background and the nature of the site. Now I'll turn it over to Tao, who is our lighting designer, to take us through the lighting.
Thank you, Samir.
Yeah.
I'm Tao Hamed from HGA. I'm lead lighting design for the project, and I wanted to start with the lighting discussions with this context where all the light is located in this very wooded area. Naturally, the lighting is going to be blended into landscape. And our main goal is to provide a balance between the light pollution and provide also security and safety for people there. So with that guidance, we wanted to outline the design criteria we established for this project. The first one is for the town bylaw. So I wanted to highlight some of those items that is applicable, most important to this project. First of all, all the light fixtures need to be fully shielded, and we need to comply with international dark sky standards to minimize light pollution and light trespass. Light intensity, it needs to be at 5.5 for candle average. The light color temperatures should not exceed 35 K, which will render the site with a warm light instead of cool blue light. The LED light source need to be used to reduce the energy usage. And we also follow the guidance for pole height. The maximum is for pedestrian walkways is 14 feet, and for the parking and the roadway will be 20 feet. The wall-mounted light on the buildings should have 12 feet maximum above the grade mounting height. And lastly, wanted to also mention that hours of operation is half hours before the business and after business. Those are the operational hours planned for this building for lighting. We designed to meet all of those standards and outlined here in the bylaw. And also wanted to emphasize that we meet all the design standards outlined by International Dark Sky. And their inner ordinance, they define the lighting zones and also have readings for all the light fixtures that proposed for the site lighting. We highlighted here is this project is going to be in a lighting zone 2. Within this lighting zones, there are 3 major criteria were followed. One is called B, the middle one is U, and the last one is G. So I have a diagram here just to explain what those things are. So for U, the one in the middle is for uplight. So anything blue you see in this diagram is uplight needs to be 0. So when we select light fixtures, we will follow this guidance for the uplight to be 0. And B is more for the backlight. How much light goes to the back of the fixtures is more concerned about light trespass. So here depends on how it's located in a distance with the property line. You have different reading is allowed. For this time zone we have for our project, and the B3 is the maximum it's allowed, and most of our fixture selection is in below the B3 level. And lastly, want to explain a little bit about the G1. G is measuring glares, and if you think about walking at night, and if the fixture make you feel very uncomfortable, very glary, that's what this is measured. So all of our fixtures will be under G1 for this project. And because all of those measures we have done, so we anticipate we will earn 1 LEED credit for the project. And the next one I wanted to here briefly talk about the major site components. The first one is the light poles. They are, as mentioned earlier, will be maximum at 20 feet tall. So those are shown in red, and they are all facing away from property line towards the project site. And additionally, we have some bollards at the low 4 feet height would be placed at most of the building entrances. We have minimum landscape lighting are proposed, such as some pole with with light is mounted pointed down to lighted rock. I can show a little bit detail later where they're located, as well as some garden bollards, as well as handrail light in the garden area. Next one is wanted to talk about a little bit the enlarged plan around the main entrance area. We have 2 major lighting components, which is light pole at 20 feet facing away from property line, as well as the bollards to guide people to the entrance for safety. And I wanted to mention, we have submitted the full photometric calculations for the whole site, that where you can, those are the point-to-point calculation as example showing here, that where you can read at near the property lines there, all has read as 0 foot candles. And I want to show a little bit enlarged plan here at Corey Garden that were in addition to the 20 feet pole light as we have talked about, and the bollard light around the entrance and the pathway. We do have additional this landscape lighting showing in purple here. They are lighting that pathway as well as lighting the nearby landscape and the rock to provide level of safeties on the edge of the pathway. And they are also on the pointed down on the pole. I wanted to show some strategies we have thought about how to use lighting control as a tool to minimize light pollution. Lighting controls for this project is a balance safety, light pollution, and for energy reduction. For exterior lighting, our strategy is during the day, light will be automatically off by photocells. And at night or after half hours after business hours, a light will go down to a dimmed levels, and the control will be able to accommodate that. For interior lightings, and all the light will be on half hours before business hours, and half and off and half hours after business hours for majority of the interior lighting. And there is minimal lighting will be left on for emergency and security. And we will had some strategies to place those more towards inboard of the building instead of around the parameters. And then also some of the control strategies that will help additional for additional measures for light pollution reduction. So like all the enclosed spaces will have occupancy sensors, and light will be off automatically when it's not occupied. And lastly, I think all the interior lighting is also are all dimmable to optimize the control for flexibility. Okay. Samir mentioned about earlier about some considerations for spill lights in the lobby, and for the lobby interior lightings, we do have some uplights in to highlight the timber structures, but they are all in the center of the space that will not spill beyond its edge of the building. And the majority of light in the space are downlightings. And we have talked about earlier about the control strategies that the light will be off after business hours. For example, in this space, we would select minimal downlights, not uplights, being on for emergency and security operation.
So we think that what Tao described, and it's majority downlight within the lobby, and the fact that controls will be put them off after hours, half an hour after business hours. And a very important thing that we wanted to mention is that this is what exists out there today at the MAC. So this is kind of a pickleball or tennis tournament, but these poles are located right here where the tennis courts are. Those are being taken out as part of the project. So those light fixtures that are kind of blaring, lights will be taken out. So we think we're improving on the existing condition enormously. And to the specific question about how much light spill out from the lobby would be seen from 128, again, the video animation of how very little is seen of the whole development. I do want to point out what was presented last time in terms of the landscape. The bright green around the perimeter, and specifically in this case, the south side of the loop road towards 128 will be a lot of new planting that is evergreens. So we think we have multiple layers of kind of safety that for us, we're not concerned about light spill from the lobby that makes it onerous to anybody on 128. And this is why. So it's all of these layers of things that we think make it go away as a concern. And I think at this point, we said we'll take a break and address questions before we move into sustainability. If anybody has questions about comments about the architectural portion or the lighting portion, please. That's it.
Mary?
I got a little confused. It's I think close to one of the last slides that the exterior lighting is on all night. Is that the 20-foot poles around the perimeter of the property?
Yes, mostly, yeah. Well, there will be some interior lighting as well.
Okay, so then, and what it says for the landscape lighting, it's a half hour before and after business hours. What are business hours?
We have, oh, go ahead.
8 to 5?
8 to 5.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
We-
Online. Okay.
And then.
Okay.
My only last question was, and maybe I missed it, is there something new in the packet? Is I think it's been asked a couple times about trying to get that visual from 128 in wintertime, so when the trees aren't fully blue. I don't know if that's been put in the packet or not. I haven't seen it. Do we have that?
No, we don't feel, there's a concern primarily from the topography, not as much vegetation. So I think maybe a section that shows how the view angle from anywhere on 128 towards the upper meadow is screened simply by the elevational difference and the view angle. On top of that, there's trees, whether winter or summer. On top of that, there's the new planting that is evergreen. We feel as confident as we can be about that not being a concern. Of course, we're happy to show that section and why we think it's that view angle really is the key element. Doing a visual that is trees in winter, it's just a kind of a difficult thing to achieve.
Laura. Thanks, Amir. I think overall it's really terrific architectural expression, and the way that it's really integrated in the site is lovely. I had some questions, just clarifying questions about the light. So Tao talked about the bug rating with a glare rating of 1. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little more about why the 1 is necessary, or why that's the kind of criteria that you're using, as opposed to 0, no glare.
Well, the glare is relates to, ideally it would be nice to be glare 0, which some of our fixture is glare 0. Again, this is the maximum we can go, which is defined by dark sky standards, and also referenced by the bylaw, right? So the limitation of not be able to go to G0 sometimes is you have to get enough light out to light the roadways, right, to light the space. So that sometimes has to do with the mounting height, or so many other things. The effect is not able to get to be G0. Again, we have in the submittals, we have noted all the actual readings for the fixtures we selected. So they are maximum is G1, and a lot of them is G0.
Okay. Thank you. And then even with the G1, that's still dark sky compliant.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is highlighted, the box is what the dark sky standards for this project.
Okay, great. And then talked about the interior, the atrium going off at, after business hours. If that's still the main lobby and people are there, kind of in and out later on in the evening, is there a low light level, or how do you?
We'll have to have the emergency lighting, and I'm sure you've experienced nowadays, you go into a stair and it's kind of dim, and then it kind of brightens up on occupancy.
Yeah.
Tao, just to kind of control my layperson's, is that kind of what we would have in the lobby? The fact that it's dim after hours, but if anybody needs to go through it for whatever reason, it's ramped up. Is that kind of the control that we would have?
Yeah. You're right.
Okay. Is there any signage, CST signage on the site that is lit, or?
Yeah, nothing that is specifically lit.
Okay.
We do have, and in the package we submitted, there is the outdoor signage, which is granite
Yeah.
warm or whatever. We're not putting any specific lighting on it.
Okay,
We're hoping that the light levels that Tao has developed for the site will be sufficient
ambient light,
to
okay.
amplify
Yeah.
for everything. There's no actual signage on the building at all.
Yeah.
If you go there, you know where you're going. It's
Yeah.
not like you're passing by on the road.
okay. And then my last question about lighting was, it didn't look like you were lighting that upper patio in front. Is that correct? I was just trying to understand that diagram. It was one of the closer.
The upper patio, I think, Tao, we have a pergola that has some lighting under it. Let me.
Is that the Corey one? Corey?
That one.
This
is-
upper patio, that
Oh, the patio.
yeah, so the light levels here, I'm going to the next. The light levels here are 3, let's see.
Yeah, 3.4. We again, because it's so many different lighting components here on the plan, we showed the major ones. We did not highlight this one. So if you look at the submittal we submitted this fixture we proposed here have G0, U0, everything is 0, reading. So it's just all the downlight component.
From a kind
So-
of overhead trellis or
A
canopy.
trellis,
Okay,
overhead.
got it.
Yeah, on the trellis, yes.
Yeah, it's these linear bars, we didn't
Yes.
highlight them in
Okay.
color, but that's.
All right.
Yeah, it is included in the submiddle. It's just a lot of detail here.
Okay, I get it. I was
display.
wondering why that was dark. So in general, it's safe to say that the pedestrian routes and the accessible routes are half a foot candle average for passage after dark. So
Correct, that's the target.
That seems
That's the-
totally
yeah.
appropriate.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's in the bylaw.
Yeah, okay. So, but not brighter. I mean, I think that's an appropriate level of light, but it's not overlit. So I
Exactly.
think that's
I think,
important.
absolutely.
Okay, thank
Right,
you.
Gordon has.
For the first time in my life, I'm hard pressed to find any critical comments about the building. I think your use of material, your use of the existing topography is spectacular, and use of different materials and textures and forms all over the site. It's just terrific. The one thing I have, having done a bunch of laboratory buildings here, the equipment enclosure, the roofscape enclosure here, and what it encloses in here. Just for my edification, what will be inside that roof enclosure?
Jacob, are you still on? Just so that you keep me in check. We have air-cooled chillers that are
So it's just HVAC?
HVAC.
That's it?
Yeah, and we've studied kind of how high that screen needs to be so that your approach screen is the highest point of anything. So it's carefully studied so that it is screening visually, whatever equipment goes in there.
But forgive my ignorance as to what cell signaling actually does, but there's no exhaust fans that they should be concerned with.
There are exhaust fans, and I can go to, yes, and there are fume hoods within a lab like this that needs to take care of any potential hazardous fumes and take them out through an exhaust. And we've worked diligently with our mechanical engineers to put those at a location, again, the kind of the front of this south side is visible for people approaching the campus. And as you saw from the view from the 40 bottom, we wanted those in a location where you don't see them from either side. They do need to go up above the roof height to make it safe for someone who is out there to clean up the PV array or something like this. And we studied that through a dispersion model of any exhaust so that it is safe.
Just to ask that.
Exactly. So yeah, all of that.
And my last question is just the mechanical equipment looks like it was designed as a part of the architecture. Wasn't just a piece of mechanical equipment then enclosed. It looks like it's integral to the whole building design.
Thanks for your comment. This was a goal, and it is, I mean, you see it here. It was a goal We presented different ways. Typically in buildings, the mechanical spaces are clad in metal or, and they stand as to me, it's like a hat on top of your building. And we wanted that to be really part of the massing, part of that cascading form. And doing it in brick was just as economic, actually less expensive than the metal structures that people
I
use.
applaud you and I applaud the owner for even considering to do that. It's having had some bad experiences with rooftop equipment and vinyl, this is exceptional.
Great.
So let's keep going,
Yeah.
and we'll take public comment at the end on all of the issues.
Ariane?
Yeah, so
All
I'm
right.
gonna stay off camera because I have not the greatest bandwidth. But you've seen some in the architecture and lighting diagrams and renderings, some of the poetry of how this project connects to nature and views. That is one manifestation of the sustainability goals of the project. Another is the pursuit of these certification programs that CST is using to hold them to a third-party review of the holistic goals of sustainability that this project is pursuing. So the first that we're pursuing is LEED certification. So this is put out by the United States Green Building Council. For anyone who's not familiar with LEED, it's one of the most widely recognized rating systems, and not only accommodates the balance of, they phrase it as business, people, and environment. You often hear the definitions of sustainability as people, profit, and planet. But they also, if you can go to the next slide, Samir, balance them across multiple categories. So LEED has a holistic view of sustainability for the project, and there are certain prerequisites that you have to accomplish in each of these categories, as well as additional credits that go above and beyond, and that helps direct what level of LEED certification you achieve for your project. So this is a balanced system, and we're pursuing LEED Gold for this project. So we're accomplishing or aiming to accomplish many of these credits, including the lighting one that Tao highlighted earlier with the dark sky compliance. The next rating system that we're pursuing for this project is the WELL building standard. And WELL is really focused in on the human side of sustainability. So human health and well-being is the name of the game, though among that, and you can go to the next slide, within that focus, WELL is holistic, looking at the organization's operations, their HR policies, as well as design considerations. So this one is partially a part of the design team's role, and a lot of it is CST's operations, facilities, and HR looking at which of their policies and operations practices already align with the WELL system, and where would they be interested in making some upgrades or updates to accomplish a higher level of certification. So another third-party rating system accomplishes a really high performance focused on well-being, and they, just like LEED, have categories that they focus that on, but you can see that their categories look a little bit different than the LEED ones. So there's nothing here about energy, for example, because they're really focused in on human health and well-being. So from a built environment perspective, there's overlap with LEED in some of these categories with like air and thermal comfort and materials, but there are also new categories that don't overlap with other standards such as nourishment, community, and mind, looking at the mental health of people inside of a well-certified space. And then the final certification that we're pursuing, this is sort of an add-on to the LEED certification, is LEED Zero Carbon. So this speaks to the goal that Samir showed at the very beginning of working towards a zero carbon campus. This looks at the amount of total carbon emitted associated with the project, removing the total carbon avoided. And it's essentially an equation working through, all right, can we get our carbon emissions as low as possible? And then there is a offset component at the final stage of this to achieve carbon balance. This looks at everything associated with the building construction, as well as the transportation required for employees commuting to the site. So it's a holistic standard really focusing in on carbon reduction. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into carbon now with the remaining of our topics, and we'll sort of close out with a few examples of other sustainability strategies on this project. So first, we're really digging into how do we work towards a zero carbon campus, and this is a balance of embodied and operational carbon. And so what we have here is a graphic from the Carbon Leadership Forum, one of the standards organizations that's really helping elevate methodologies and workflows around carbon reduction in the built environment. Embodied carbon is a big part of the cycle. So embodied carbon is associated with the material extraction, manufacturing, transportation, and construction to a site on the front end of a project. And then on the back end, there's embodied carbon associated with maintenance and repair and deconstruction and waste. So for this project, we're really focusing on that front end of embodied carbon, reducing that as low as possible while thinking about the back end. And then operational carbon is about the energy use that a building uses. So this graphic here is just demonstrating a typical building. And in this case, this is a graphic from 2020 because 2030 is on year 10 of the building life, just showing an example of how embodied carbon and operational carbon might be associated over the life of a building. And one thing I just want to draw attention to here is that 2030 line is really associated with a lot of global carbon reduction targets. So in this project is being built, within this time span, will be open by 2030. The upfront carbon is really critical to reduce as much as possible so that this project can contribute positively to global carbon emission reductions, even though over the life of the project, there are energy associated carbon emissions as well. And the calculation over life is a balance of both. We really are looking at reducing as much as possible in both cases. And then in this case, because we're looking at a very energy efficient project, we're more associated with that lower percentage or lower number. So for embodied carbon reduction strategies, we have several that we've even talked about a little bit today. You've seen Samir talk a bit about the mass timber structure in the lobby. So mass timber is a much lower embodied carbon structural material than steel or concrete. So we're leveraging it where it makes sense programmatically, which is the lobby. We're also looking at lowered embodied carbon materials for the heavy hitters that sometimes people, sometimes they aren't even visible. And so you can have high performance products that are also lower embodied carbon to produce. So insulation is one example of that. It's hidden behind the walls, but makes a big difference, which we select. And then facade materials, interior finishes, and then we're also looking at optimization. So selecting products that have the lowest embodied carbon possible that also meet the performance standards and requirements, including some newer territory like MEP systems, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. There's a lot of ductwork, there's a lot of wiring, there's a lot of product that goes into a building, and there's embodied carbon associated with all of that. So our firms are working together with CST to look at where we can reduce material and where we can optimize with our material selections. And next, we'll pass it over to operational carbon for the BR+A team to take us through that. Jacob, you're on mute.
Is it *6?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Now we hear you.
Is that better?
Yes.
All
Yeah.
right. So I hope everybody's starting to see a pattern here where this is one of those magical dream projects that you get once in a lifetime that are trying to do everything as sustainable as possible. So building off of what Ariane was describing with the overall total carbon, we wanted to work with Cell Signaling and HCA to really be best in class in terms of energy performance. So what this slide is showing is each one of those bars is a different building in Boston or Cambridge. And this is based on their actual measured energy data. In red is their fossil fuel consumption, and in yellow is their electricity consumption. And the y-axis on the left-hand side there, you see 100, 200, 300. That's the energy use intensity. So that's how many thousands of BTUs per square foot per year that each of these buildings use. So it's an intensity of consumption of energy on an annual basis. And on the very, very far right, you see CST. So this is this project achieving 71% projected reduction from the average in terms of total energy. But even beyond just that best in class reduction in total energy, we're really focusing on eliminating fossil fuels. And so you can see we're getting to roughly 99%, approaching 100% reduction in fossil fuel consumption compared to that benchmark data. So really a leap forward in terms of a truly efficient, low fossil fuel design for this building.
I would highlight one thing that is important about this graph. We're benchmarking against other lab buildings, and lab buildings are big consumers of energy. So the fact that we are way better than all of these is the big statement.
Hi, I'm Isabel Doran. I'm with BR+A on their sustainable design team. I'm also working on the energy modeling for this project. And in addition to benchmarking, we also wanted to highlight the projected carbon emissions that were calculated from our energy model. Not only is CST best in class for energy performance, as Jacob had mentioned, they're also set on becoming a leader for utilizing cleaner energy. With current Massachusetts emission factors, we're showing a 37% reduction in carbon emissions against a code baseline. CST is also focused on providing cleaner energy in the future to reach the net zero carbon goal that will be required by the Massachusetts Climate Bill enacted in 2021 to become carbon neutral by 2050. And as the grid becomes cleaner, those carbon emission reductions will continue to increase. And you can see in the graphs to the right, the progression of fewer carbon emissions until eventually we will aim to hit that 100% renewable mark. You can see in that bottom graph that 99% reduction incorporates the renewable energy that's being designed into the project. Go to the next slide. We also wanted to provide a high-level overview of the energy conservation measures that are included within the mechanical design. And this includes 100% outdoor air system, as well as energy recovery. And the design is also using cutting edge technologies, including a ground source heat pump for geothermal heating and cooling that will allow for clean heating and cooling and will help target those carbon neutral goals. Our current projected EUI, or energy use intensity, is 101 kBTU per square foot, which is significantly lower, as Jacob had mentioned, than labs that we're seeing in Boston and Cambridge. And this project is also pursuing the Mass Save Incentive Program, which can provide funding for energy efficient projects. And in order to qualify, the building must show 40% reduction against a code minimum baseline, which you can see in that graph. We're with the highly efficient design, including the geothermal heating and cooling, we're currently showing a 49% reduction against that baseline, which is significantly under that 40% requirement. So we're confident that we'll be able to qualify for those incentives.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Russell Knutson. I was fortunate to be part of the geothermal design team on this project. So under this beautiful building and beautiful developed site is a ground source system, ground source heat exchange system, or we're calling it geothermal for short. Just for a little bit of scale and context, that rendering on the right side just shows you how deep these piping systems are installed. So this is a 600-foot deep proposed system on this site. There are roughly 72 vertical bores. These are sealed pipes, so they're not exchanging water from the system to the ground and from the ground to the system. This is a closed loop piping. This is the by far best way to eliminate natural gas usage on a building site and electrify the heating and cooling of the building. There's a lot of excitement right now for geothermal systems. These are incentivized substantially from the federal government as well as the state of Massachusetts for ground source heating and cooling. One more thing to mention, Samir, if we can go back, I did gloss over one point that we are often asked, which is the fluid that's circulated through this piping system. I did just want to mention it is a non-toxic fluid. So it's a water mixed with a food grade antifreeze solution, but it's it's an antifreeze that is non-toxic. We can move to the next slide. Right now, the planned location for this system is in the blue shaded area. Again, we're planning 72 vertical bores, and the future the site master planning has identified areas for a future 88 bores in the red outlined areas. Those would be proposed to be installed as part of the phase 2 building project. I think we are back to Ariana.
Yeah. So as we close out the sustainability section, we have this axonometric diagram just to highlight a few of the additional strategies, some that we've talked about here. But I just want to speak to, this is a really unique site. As Jacob said, it's a once in a career opportunity to really bring together people with the ecosystem, with nature in a really efficient, low carbon way. So the connection from the inside of the building to views and to nature and to daylight will be just outstanding for people using the building. And at the same time, we're doing this in a way that, utilize bird safe glass, as Samir talked about earlier. We're thinking about the dark sky compliance for nighttime, nocturnal animals. We're really bringing the access to the park to the north of the site. There's a lot of ecological restoration that's happening here, in addition to rainwater, gray water collection, designing to future rainfall levels. So this is truly balancing that goal of people, profit, and planet enhancement in a holistic sustainability approach. And with that, I think we'll turn it over again to questions for the sustainability portion, or however you want to take it.
We close with a statement and ask Mark, what should we be presenting about sustainability in a big picture? And he said, actually, the performance standards in the bylaws doesn't have anything on sustainability. So what we're doing here, as you can see, is exemplary in terms of what a building should be like. We're all very excited about it, the whole team, as you can see, and maybe this can become the precedent for next time. But with that, again, we'll open it for questions on any of the information that you heard.
I have 2 quick questions. I assume that you're meeting the stretch code and exceeding it. We are a stretch code community, but not a specialized opt-in code.
We are.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I'm looking at your this last slide. And first of all, I think I can see why Jacob says it's a once in a lifetime project. And I've seen this is way not a requirement of the special permit, but more of a curiosity. You have the same visual at the BU building, which BR+A worked on.
Yeah.
It would be great to include education materials about the building for visitors, for the public. That's not a requirement, obviously, because it's sort of outside of our, but I think that you are.
We're more than
Yeah,
happy.
yeah, and the
peddling and our performance.
The wall at BU
great
that looks
drawing.
very much like this would be a great model. It's a really, and the website
In
and
the
all that.
building, Sarah?
So, what?
In the building?
Yeah, in the building, if you get a chance to see the BU building, it's got this amazing,
Display about
display
the
and
features.
videos but anyway, and then Jacob mentioned you're having the ground source, but then in the discussion of the architecture, you're having air source heat pumps on the roof, so it's a combination. Is that what I led to believe?
Yeah, we do have,
And
May I
so
jump
then
in there?
yeah, please.
Yeah, and then my
Yeah,
question is,
so-
what about noise? Have you modeled the noise from the air source heat pumps on the roof?
Go ahead, Jacob.
So actually it's a hybrid of both ground source and exhaust source. So we're capturing heat from the exhaust air with a heat pump system, using the heat recovery chillers in the building. So the only outdoor equipment is basically, as Samir was showing earlier, the tips of those exhaust fans, which of course have to be outdoors because you have to exhaust the air from the fume hoods. And the other is the air-cooled chillers that are basically a cooling only system that would only run in the summertime. And basically any building like this would need some way to reject heat in the summertime, similar to what we have here. And because of the screening and, you know, the distance from any other properties, it's actually very low risk of this being a noise nuisance. Samir, I don't know if you want to talk about any of the noise modeling that was done.
We have not done noise modeling to answer directly. But as you heard from Jacob, this is supplemental to the normal running of the building. So, and there's no real close abutting neighbors. We didn't think it's necessary, but
And then the other question I have that didn't come up was, we touched on this before, which is the electric demand issues in the region. Obviously, you're reducing your electric demand if you have an EUI of 7. What was it? 7? Are you doing demand management, demand response? The tier 4 generators to do demand response?
I don't, we're gonna be, I
I'm looking
don't
because we
think that,
talked about
yeah,
that.
I don't think that CST is currently engaged in that program. But something is, I know that it's something that Peter Nudo thinks about.
Yeah, okay. But for the region, it's also important. Okay, Lauren?
Great project in terms of the sustainability and the resiliency features. It's really, you are stretching boundaries here. It's really terrific to see. And I love Sarah's idea of the wall at BU, in addition to all the amazing building oriented things. I think the site tells a really good story too about habitat connectivity, water quality improvements, trail network, and so forth. My few questions are, you talked a lot about the renewable and energy efficient technologies to provide energy. Did you also, I mean, to get to that, you know, bottom of the graph, you must also be thinking about the demand in terms of air changes and, you know, the kind of lab heavy energy uses in the lab.
absolutely. It starts with kind of us selecting low flow fume hoods. That's kind
Okay.
of the biggest driver, as you
Yeah.
probably know from that work. So we will be specifying low flow fume hoods and minimizing the amount of ventilation air that goes in to the labs by use of chill beams and
Okay.
active chill beams. And
Are you using an air acuity or at all?
we are specifying air acuity, and for those that don't know, air acuity actually sniffs the air system in the lab and this determines if there is enough levels of hazardous fumes that need to kick in the ventilation pipe. So that that is done to really reduce, because typically you don't have that problem. And there's in labs you're using, as Isabel described, outside air, a lot of outside air, and you don't want to be heating that. So minimizing the load is key.
And lab gases, I'm assuming you have a need for lab gases and.
We do.
Not new anymore.
There's a nitrogen tank, there's a CO2 tank, all being done with
Yep.
the right, meeting all the kind of codes. And,
Yeah. And
right
natural
safety.
gases too, I would assume, or,
We have natural gas only as backup to boilers.
oh, okay.
And is that accurate, Jacob? Just to make sure I'm not.
Yeah, we have a fossil fuel backup just for basically the extreme worst case scenario of some system failure or if there's a power grid outage.
But there's no natural gas use in those.
Okay, okay. And then the last two questions, these are all sort of on hitting different topics. The bird safe glass, I see that you're incorporating that, and I know you've got some big glassy areas, but how do you determine where you actually need the glass? Is it elevation based or is it?
It's elevation based, and it is, if you go for the lead credit, that determines it's prescribed.
It's prescribed.
So a lot of the glassy areas have it, and it's specifically is concerned with where birds fly, which is kind of tree canopy height. You would think it's way up, it's not actually, it's really within a certain range.
Yeah.
So of course, everything that is glassy within that And from experience on other projects, anything that is clear through, like glass and glass,
Yeah.
that is where birds
Yeah.
kind of get fooled about flying through
Yeah.
a space.
Right.
So you want that, and it's simple trick
Yeah.
at a certain pattern that makes it simple.
Right. And the last question was on the location phasing diagram about the wells, and you were showing phase one, phase two. And it looked like the phase two were in parts that you're going to be landscaping in phase one.
Actually, we're being very careful about not doing that. Basically, the edge between, especially on the west side here, this will be the laydown area for building phase two.
Okay.
So the landscape will be minimal, just to kind of make it look good. And it's in the same, actually on the east side, it will be landscape, but because we're going to be anticipating the structure of the parking. So that it makes sense that we are kind of disturbing the areas
Yeah.
and not finishing the landscape in the areas where the additional wells will be put.
Okay. And then the side on the left where there are additional wells, is that under the next phase of the building? No, it's just.
No,
So there would be
we're
a.
staying away, although
Yeah.
like the BU project example
Yeah.
that Sarah mentioned has all of these geothermals under the building.
Right.
You're kind of putting yourself in trouble in case anything happens. So it is safer to just do the
Yeah.
geothermal walls in the field as opposed to
Okay.
under any structure.
And then there would be a subsequent phase two landscape plan that would address the disturbance.
Exactly.
There. Okay.
Exactly.
And then just staying on those wells for a minute, how deep did you say they are?
600 feet. That's where the reason you go to different depths. You're trying to optimize, and we did a test well to figure out where is the right temperature and depth, and we're trying to balance the number of wells and the depth, their depth, to get the most of this thermal exchange.
And is there bedrock down there too?
All bedrock.
Okay.
We're boring through rock.
Yeah.
One other question, this is a BL2 lab, is that
It is
correct?
BL2.
And if Cell Signaling's business were to change or sell the building in some future date, if it were to go to a different level, what kind of permitting has to happen to have that happen at a BL3 level or?
My partner, Mark Allen, is.
Yeah, sure. Mark Allen, HGA. The labs would have to be significantly redesigned and the systems would be quite significant to redesign. So that would, a minimum trigger building permit. There's also some other permitting operationally that would need to be in place.
So if the special permit had a condition that this is for a BL2 lab and any additional level would require revising the special permit, reviewing the special permit, would that be a hardship?
Mark, I mean, based on what Mark just said, I don't think so, because it does require redesign to make it possible to have the BSL3.
Yeah, CST would probably prefer not to have too many conditions placed. But it's hard to imagine a scenario where they would need that particular flexibility.
And then I'm not sure what your next part of your presentation is, but when you talked about lead and also we didn't touch about it on transportation. Do you have a plan for any carpooling program or minibus or what, that kind of thing in the operation plan?
Ariane, I know that's the reason we're not achieving platinum. Can you explain what we know about provisions under the LEED credit?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Samir, you were a little bit muted. Can you repeat the question?
So Sarah's question is about the transportation aspects of the LEED credits and whether CST has any carpooling programs and anything that would help achieve those credits.
Yeah, so CST's policies around transportation will support the carbon reduction goals and the calculations for that LEED zero carbon. Some of them will be assisting with the well certification, but actually the transportation credits for LEED are very, very specific. They're looking for a little bit of parking for programs like carpooling. But other than that, it doesn't really help you achieve the LEED transportation credits to have carpooling access as policies. They're really looking more for public transit, and they're very prescriptive about what they're looking for. So in the location and if you go to the next slide, actually, Samir, in the location and transportation category, there are many credits that are essentially prioritizing urban sites. And so this being a more, rural location that doesn't necessarily have multiple modes of public transit meeting the prescriptive requirements of LEED, we're actually not achieving several of those credits in this category, which has essentially, as Samir said, kept us out of that platinum territory.
But what we know from the design is they're prioritizing bicycle riding and storage, showers, and all of that, amenities that come with that, charging stations for parking.
Yep. Lots of sustainable transportation is enhanced and supported. It just isn't necessarily on the carpooling side to getting us very far for LEED.
Okay, why don't we continue? Do you have more?
No, I think that's
Okay,
it.
oh, sorry, Mary, do you have comment?
I just wanted to follow up on the electric demand question. Do you, and because Cape Ann has an obvious grid shortcoming, do you have, I saw some numbers on a slide, but do you have like the daily or yearly electric capacity numbers?
BRPLA, do we know what the electric anticipated consumption would be for the building?
Do you have that, Isabel, from our report for the total electrical energy per year?
We do have it in the report. It's not in this slideshow, but I can get those numbers. We have that from the energy model.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
Just real quick, did either of the other CST facilities have any LEED certifications?
I don't know that for sure. I think
I think there's a logo on the door at
yes.
in Danbury.
Okay, any comments from the public? I'm trying to. Maybe you could stop sharing, Samira, unless if we need it back, we'll grab it. Martha.
I would love to speak up and say.
Okay, say your name and address.
Martha Farmer, 12 Bridge Street in Manchester. I worked with self-singing for many years and with Newman Biolabs as well. And Newman Biolabs has done an incredible job. I've been to their new building, I believe that's even certified. Did you guys involved in the design?
No.
Okay. It's gorgeous. And they've done a lot with art that is installed outside. The Cohn family has quite an art collection. I expect to see some of it associated with this building as well. But so I do have a question. Will there be public access? Right now in the Biolabs, you could just go in and wander around the grounds. Will you have that kind of access, and will you have event space, at least in the evenings when the employees are gone, when you could have events?
So, the CSD leadership was keen on having the site be publicly accessible. We are providing a trailhead parking and access to the trailhead connecting to that. That was important. The facility itself is controlled, so not everybody can go in at any time, that kind of thing. We didn't talk about, there are spaces in the building that can accommodate an event or something, but we didn't really talk about that being part of the program. So it has to be question to CSD. But
because they do occasionally, and certainly Newman Biolabs does occasionally hold events, and it's so it's thrilling to me to have such an extraordinary building get built here. You know, we could become known for something besides the eponymous movie that is so. But it is, it just, I've been, I've known quite a few people who work at South Sigmund. The business model is wonderful. People don't like to leave, they get employed in it instead. So it's a good company to work for. And I just think this town will benefit so much from having this here. And probably, I don't have to tell you, we could use the tax credit.
Great, okay, thank you. Any other public comments? I don't see any online. Any other comments from the board? Marty brought up the tax issues. I know the FinCom is reviewing the financial analysis
It's on their agenda tomorrow night.
tomorrow night. So anybody who wants to attend that, feel free. They'll give us a report. But thank you for providing that information. With that, I will take a motion to continue our hearing. Oh, wait. Sorry. Aaron, sorry. No, sorry. You sat there too patiently. And shall I ask you to share? And give you the opportunity to share? That's
limited comments, so this will not be exhaustive.
yeah, sorry. Didn't mean to have you sit there all night. For those of you who don't know, Darren represents Weston Sampson, who's our peer reviewer. You should be able to share.
Yes, yeah, no, I have permission, so thank you. My colleague, Frank Getchell is on the line too, so we just have a brief presentation. Tonight we'll be touching on the outdoor lighting standards, the noise standards which were discussed 2 weeks ago, and the geothermal system considerations. So just to dive in, the outdoor lighting standards, we're now on our supplemental peer review memo, number 3, which we issued this afternoon. So we just had limited comments on the lighting. As was mentioned, there's minimal light trespass, and the bylaw requires that the applicants are minimizing light trespass. We had identified one area near the MAC that does have light trespass. It's at a maximum of 0.6. Right over here on the western side of the property. Again, the bylaw doesn't require illumination of any light trespass. It just requires that it is minimized. Perimeter elsewhere is minimized. And I just mentioned before, the project is dark sky compliant. So we're just flagging that as an item for the planning board to review. We did get an update on our initial comment from our April memo related to the loading dock. We would requested additional lighting. The applicant had noted that has been added to the plans, and we're just requesting that documentation is provided to the planning board just for verification. And our last lighting comment, as was kind of exhaustively discussed to date, I'll pull up the other plan. It's tied to the atriums. Just in the atrium area, we were just, we had, from the initial peer review, a concern about light spillage, obviously that's facing the highway. And it's been discussed, the hours of operation, the downlighting, all that from today. And the applicant had indicated that they will be finalizing that design. I don't think the interior lighting is finalized, so as that's finalized, and there's potentially additional photometric information that should be provided to the town as a recommendation from us in Sampson. The next topic area is the noise standard, which was discussed last week. We just had 2 comments on that. First is the applicant had just noted they're using some coverings of the blasting, and we were just looking for the sound dampening information for what that is. It's not shown on the drawings. And then also discussed last week was hours of operation of blasting related to the noise standard for 2 weeks ago. I believe the applicant had requested as a condition or a waiver that the hours are shifted before 8 a.m. Just so they're not overlapping with the school time. So we were just flagging that discussion in the last hearing. So with that, I will transfer over to Frank to go over our geothermal system comments, which are also fairly limited. We just have 3 comments to run through. I'll stop sharing. I can pull up just I'll stop sharing. There's nothing really.
Should I give somebody else sharing?
No, there's nothing like visually on the geothermal system to review.
Okay.
Good evening. Yeah, I don't have any visuals at this time, but I've had an opportunity to review the information that's been provided so far by the applicant regarding the proposed geothermal system. And I provided some comments on it because, I've looked at the bylaws, and the issue is that the bylaws currently don't have anything specific to geothermal systems. However, they do have a groundwater and surface water protection overlay district that does discuss impacts regarding site development. And so I kind of targeted those and looked at them relative to what's being proposed, specifically because you have a cold water resource that's been mapped by the DEP that's very close to the site, about 500 feet away, Sawmill Brook. And then you also have a transient public community supply well that also is identified by the state. I believe that's located over at the storage facility. That's also within about 500 feet of the site. The information that's been provided by the applicant was a generalized letter regarding the potential for the impact regarding thermal impacts on the groundwater resources. But it was based on primarily some generalized information, was not necessarily site specific. And what's key about it is it does identify that if the system works as is theoretically optimal, which is via convection, using the rock itself to absorb or exchange the heat and cooling, that's fine. But if there's advection, which means the groundwater will move that heat away from the site, that is something that is really not addressed. And I had an opportunity to look at the GZA report, which does look at the bedrock at the site, and appears there's a fault that runs through the site. So faults are breaks in the rock. That's how groundwater moves through rock, is through breaks and fractures. So I've requested information on the 2 test wells beyond what's already been provided. Specifically, I was looking for the logs to see if the driller encountered any water-bearing zones, what the yields might have been associated with that. Because as a hydrogeologist, that gives me a general idea as to what kind of movement of groundwater from the site towards the stream or towards a nearby well might be. So my comments are really based on looking for more information and addressing those issues. There's 2 phases of boreholes that are going in, and maybe some of that information can be gathered and then used to address these comments. But right now, the existing information does not allow to address that impact, at least based on advection as a mechanism for moving, thermally impacted water, groundwater, away from the site towards either that cold water resource or towards that nearby supply well. And that's all I have to say at this point.
Thank you. And that was the entirety of our comments on those 3 topic areas. The memo we've issued is cumulative, so we tracked additional comments from the previous hearings. Questions
from the board for Weston Sampson.
This was discussed at a prior meeting, but we left as kind of an open item, the request for relief from the 6 inches of topsoil over the whole site, and we were proposing, it was proposed to put 4 inches on certain area
The
where
upper meadow.
the upper meadow. And so as a way of evaluating the ability of that upper meadow to take, I'm just wondering, how can we resolve that? Is it a question for the wildlife biologist who is saying what these different habitats might be, and is that depth sufficient? So just wondering if Weston and Sampson, either Weston and Sampson could address it, or is it a question for the wildlife biologist that we can somehow close out that request and have some assurance it's enough for the land.
Yes.
Community plans.
We tracked it as a waiver that the planning board would have to approve reducing from 6 inches to 4 inches.
Yeah.
And we were comfortable in terms of erosion slope stabilization with
Yeah.
the 4 inches based on the landscape architect's presentation 2 weeks ago, and how the plantings that they were providing, meadow mix.
So you were comfortable that the wild meadow, the successional meadow, I'm forgetting the name of it, but that.
Yeah, and the
is a
3-to-1
sufficient
slope that they
depth.
put on that area, they are gonna stabilize this, I think they're steeper slope areas. The general sort of outside area.
Yeah.
It's not that would be overcomable. Landscape for erosion, this one, I think, from site civil perspective.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. Thanks. All right, anything else?
All right, now I'll take a motion to continue the public hearing to 6:30 on July 22nd.
So moved.
Second, Peter seconds, I'm sure. All in favor?
Aye.
You look like you were
No,
gonna.
I was just gonna ask if there's some way that we could prepare for that meeting. Obviously, we've gone through the performance standards.
Yeah.
There are some open issues with Weston and Sampson. I would suggest between now and then, Matt from Hancock and
Yeah.
Karen get together and resolve whatever is outstanding. But if there's something that you require from us at that meeting, if you could let us know in advance, we're hoping to try to get closer to the finish line.
We are too.
So,
Mark and I talked about that today. I think that there's some conversations that happened with the town engineer and thoughts about our Atwater Avenue, so that maybe you and Mark can coordinate on that and come back to that as I think the open issue was safety and pedestrian safety on Atwater Avenue. So I think, and I'm hoping that maybe we can have a discussion and get to the point where we're maybe able to close the hearing and start working through the issuance of the permit. That would be my goal, is to actually get to a point where we can close the hearing then or shortly after that.
And if anyone on the board thinks of something else between now and the next hearing,
Send it to
me an
Mark.
email.
Yeah.
I'll get back to whomever on their team it's appropriate, and we'll try and
Right.
have them address the issue for that meeting.
I think as we've talked about various things that you've been jotting down that might be conditions or concerns, we send them to Mark so he can begin to.
would it be
This
helpful
one, our Mark.
if I were to, we've talked about a number of
Yeah.
waivers.
Yeah, you can
It would
provide those.
probably be appropriate to give you a waiver list of
Yeah,
our
that'd be great.
proposed waiver list. You've also talked about conditions.
Yeah.
I don't want to preempt whatever you have in mind, but we could work on that also.
Yeah, I
That
think
would
we
be
both.
I won't surprise you.
Yeah.
Just a few.
I think that would be great if we can kind of have.
Okay, well, I'll coordinate with Mark.
Great, all right, I think we all in favor, we voted to continue to 6:30 on the 22nd of July, that's a Monday. I think some of you are joining by Zoom. And Mary, were you able to go to the town clerk and sign that you watched the last meeting?
No, do I need to?
I think so,
Yeah,
there's
there's
form
a
for the
Mullins rule form that you need
Great.
to.
Thank you, everybody.
Collect at the
Thank
clerk's
you.
office, and then.
We have a couple more things tonight before we
Sets of hearings.
get to stand up and stretch.
Bring that to the next meeting and Gail will keep it in the.
Thank you, everybody online. Please feel free to stay, but a little bit. So next is Martha Farmer and Steve Carhart. Martha reached out to me and to Mark about a
Yes.
proposed renovation to their home and whether or not we would be open to waiving the requirement for 3 parking spaces. So I invited her, as we sometimes do, to come and have an informal discussion with us. This is not binding on them or on us, but it's often helpful for people, town residents who are trying to figure out what they're gonna do next to share. And I do have, I didn't get in the packet, but I have your sort of hand-drawn sketch.
Yeah.
And maybe what I could do is share the photos that were in your, that would probably be really good. So why don't you, tell us what you wanna do? And,
Not sure where I'm supposed to.
no, you could just have a seat, it's fine, you can sit, stand, whatever you want. Tell us what you wanna do and what you're.
Stand, I don't object all that wrong. So.
I too.
It's like that, I can't hear that.
Sorry, Mark. They need to be here. They need to be, he needs to be quiet.
Okay, so basically this, started with, okay, what are we gonna do when we can't live by ourselves here? We looked at some of these other places and it's like, yeah. Don't want to leave, want to stay in Manchester. How do we age in place? What will it take? And, a friend of ours who lives down the street from us, Linda Crosby, who I'm sure you all know, and David Crosby, who was several years, required round-the-clock care at their home. They have an apartment on the 3rd floor, and they had caregivers in that apartment round the clock, 24/7, to take care of David. And that they didn't have to leave their home. Linda is still where she is and very much vital part of the community. It was a terrific example. And we thought about, well, why can't we do that? We have a half-finished basement, 3/4 finished basement. It has a laundry room in it. It doesn't have, it's not set up as an apartment, but it's large enough to put a small bathroom and kitchen and laundry service in one area, and then the rest of it is like an efficiency apartment. And we would love to be able to do that. We figured we could rent it for the, until such time as we need to have a caregiver there. But we have 2 off-street parking places. There are 2 parking places in front of the house on the street that are, it's zoned for residents only, although the sign was knocked down 20-something years ago and nobody's ever put it back, and I don't think anybody realizes that it's zoned for residents only, but it is. And certainly on beautiful Saturdays, beach parking takes place even on Bridge Street. But it is, there's room for two cars out front and 2 cars in the parking area. And
you're in the general district. Right?
We're in the general district. 2 doors down from us, there's a 3-unit place that has 3 parking spaces. And on the corner, there's a 2-unit place that has 0 off-street parking, but those are grandfathered. And we understand that. The rules have been, yeah. So there's a 3rd photo in there that would show you what we would have to do a tandem. You'd have to put in an astronomical amount of fill. And it would, I mean, right now,
The
that's.
Conservation
Right,
Commission.
Conservation Commission isn't gonna wanna do that, plus you still have to have, you could have access down the steps, but it's just. It would be, if we had to do a tandem. It's basically what we're gonna do, And I don't think the Conservation Commission would let us do it anyway. So, so we're basically hoping that, we can add one unit of housing in the general district without having to add a parking space. So, that's, I'm not sure that there's much else to tell.
So, seems to me by right, you can create that second unit in the general district. That's not a problem.
It's parking.
It's parking, and I think you probably have to, go to the ZBA, to get a variance for the parking.
Well.
And I think you can show the.
I've been
I know, we back and forth.
And I was told to come here.
Yeah.
I don't, well, we can't grant waivers for parking, I don't think.
So
Maybe you should, have you got to talk to a lawyer about this?
I talked to Mark
Yeah.
Plastick and I
Talk to me.
I talked to,
Well,
so.
We
I
haven't had
was-
you spend any money yet, so
Yeah.
that's why we wanted you to
That's why
come.
we're here.
That's why we're here, yeah.
Make sure you got, yeah, I think as you talk, I think it is a ZBA.
Well, yeah, I think it is too.
So,
So you go to make a request for a variance to the ZBA.
so that's, okay, so that's a $2,500.
I'd have a conversation with Sarah Mellish first.
So
Yeah.
we did.
You
I
did, and she
and
said, come
She
here.
sent me here.
Got it.
So,
That's interesting.
so I'm not sure who's responsible for it. It's,
Well, I think it's the building inspector.
But no, but he needs to have a variance.
and Paul Orlando also said
Says here.
that, I should talk with you guys. Yeah, exactly.
I know.
I've been, like,
Sorry.
no, that's fair. I mean, it's just, it surprises me that it hasn't come up. And that there isn't a,
Because I think people just do it. They're not nice enough. to come
Yeah.
back.
well, see, I know too many of you. I can't do that. No, I
It
don't
used
want to
be-
play a game. I want
Yeah,
to do
no,
it-
no, and it, it used to be more, I think, in the planning board's hands because we were doing curb cuts and we verified the off-street parking and things like that, but I don't know that we've had a specific.
We used to have 4
situation.
cars.
That fit
We
there.
managed. So. it
But
just-
where did they go? You can't fit 3 in there?
Two in
Oh,
front
it's
of
the
the house.
tandem, you don't want to do the
two.
tandem, gotcha.
The point being, the number of parking space does not dictate how many cars you have.
Well, it used to be that people parked with their wheels on the sidewalk because the center line was actually drawn down the center of the road. The center line has been moved to make it clear that there's parking there. And there is, I mean, there's now routinely parking and it doesn't seem to be a problem, although I do notice that Randy Wood, his son who's here now, has a cone behind their last car just to make sure people don't run into it. But it is.
Well, tell you what, why don't we have a conversation with Sarah Melish and tell you what you're gonna do?
Okay.
That's fine.
Where would the third car go if it wasn't in your driveway?
In front of the
In
house.
front of the house, which is zoned residential parking.
Yeah.
So it's,
Can I make a Laura general comment that this is an illustration of the impact of the parking minimums on a dense downtown, a dense historic downtown, because
Right.
Here's somebody who wants to live in Agent Place and stay in town, and you look at that site, and there's no good way to put more parking in, and why would you do that to the downtown to make these numbers? I just think at some point, we may want to rethink having parking minimums or parking maximums or some kind of range where there's a little more flexibility because
I understand that there's some anticipation that the state may make some ruling that you end up being stuck with, but that could change.
It is possible that when the state legislature passes their new housing bond law, part of that is creating ADUs by right. And I don't think there's a parking requirement, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, well, this is obviously not an ADU. It doesn't change the footprint or anything.
Well, it is,
So it would be an
it's an
it could be
ADU.
considered.
Well, okay, it's maybe.
For sure.
That's exactly what an ADU is.
Yes, Gail also said, don't call it an ADU.
Well, I also think the town is generally looking favorably on small incremental housing down in the general downtown area. So
Yes.
this is a case study. Here it is. We're trying to do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're trying to do it above board and come and
Right.
talk to folks.
And we don't plan to do an Airbnb kind of thing. There is an organization that you can work with for visiting nurses who come from like a month to 2
Sure,
months. at
yeah,
a
sure.
time. And I have a colleague who has done that with her house in Ipswich. And that's, that was just,
In the general district, you can have 2 units, whether they're equal size or one is tiny and one
right.
is
But
large.
there's parking.
But the.
But there's the parking.
But there's the parking. So I apologize for giving you the runaround, but I think the thing to do is we'll talk to Sarah Melish. And then, it seems to me that probably is a variance question. But I think your coming has once again underscored the challenges of parking and the pitfalls of requiring more parking spaces in the dense downtown. So we appreciate that.
The more parking spaces you require, the more ground you cover with.
Exactly.
And that's not beneficial. Like, you can see that the parking space we have, there's pieces of granite that the water goes through.
Right.
So it's, and we're quite close to the water, so we're very conscious of needing to protect that space.
And you're not increasing the footprint of the building either,
No,
so.
not at all.
So.
I don't know if you know, but the salt marsh that's behind us was originally just a mud flat. Well, not originally, long ago it was a salt marsh. When we moved here, it was a mud flat. And we worked with the Great
Conservation Commission.
Yeah, and the Great Meadow Marsh folks, and we planted 5,000 Spartina plants in there, which after we got rid of the domestic geese, which we were allowed to do, the Spartina survived. With the domestic geese, when we planted, they just ate them, just like that. So the wild geese don't bother them, not enough to cause.
Do you get rid of geese? A dog?
Wild geese. No, they
That
were.
was a wild goose chase we had.
These were domestic geese. They were
Yeah.
white and gray
Oh,
geese. They
messed
were
up.
farm animals that were feral,
Oh, I see.
that people had released into the area. And those we were allowed to remove.
I think we're standing in the way of.
Yes.
I apologize. Thank you for coming and staying till 9:30 at night, and I.
Well, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
We're all learning every night as we go along
Yeah,
here.
well, this is an issue that's gonna come up again.
Absolutely,
So
yes.
figure out what the right answer is, and I don't, I understand why parking restrictions are there. But for the benefit of more housing in the area, more
Small
affordable, the small A housing.
Agreed. Great. Well, thank you, and we will see you back.
Thanks so much.
You get your wings there. Thank you. Okay, I'll take a motion. Anybody, can we review the June 10th minutes?
I didn't see them in the
Those
email.
not yet?
Yeah, I
Okay, they were-
did.
Oh,
I
they
did.
maybe just in the month. Okay. Updates. So we'll take the June 10th minutes at the next meeting. EPA zoning, the package was submitted
This
to
was,
the state.
yep. Gonna have to wait till September probably to get the answer.
At the earliest, it sounded like.
Maybe, we'll see.
We'll have more, well, we probably will have a working session, I think, of the task force and the coming up at some point to
Yeah, I think we should.
create contingency plans if there's, if the state interprets things other than what their regulations currently say.
What is the planning board's role in the communication of the MBTA zoning.
I think the task force right now is taking lead on communication. There's a communications subcommittee and Sue's been reporting out on that.
Because I'd like to voice some concerns I have with the latest agenda that was posted. Some things struck me as
Latest agenda for
the communications outreach subcommittee. You know, the task force is an arm of the planning board, and so some of these things were like individual plans to.
No, it's not. It's appointed jointly by the planning board and the select board.
Correct. With the planning board having responsibility for the bylaw. But it said communicate with spokespeople / influencers. And I've heard names float around of who these influencers are. And so I'm just concerned that will come to the meeting or tune in on Thursday. I'm expressing my concern to the planning board that that if the task force is communicating things out to the public, which seems like it wants to influence rather than educate and inform with facts and data, it's more of an influence campaign, and then asking other people in the community to do this influencing. It just seems like we're getting 3 and 4 steps removed from the planning board and the planning board / select board of communicating out data and facts to people. So as a planning board member that is still responsible for this, I have concern that we're not communicating in the right way.
But we're holding public forums to get the information out about the bylaw. And I think there's a presumption that I'll hold on that. I think the intent is to say, what is the bylaw that's being proposed? How is it developed? What is the law? What is the bylaw that's being proposed? And what are the steps?
Can I just
yes,
respond for a minute? So one of our challenges, I mean, if you tune into the meetings, we do stick to the facts and the data. And one of our challenges as a committee has been how to rebut a lot of the wrong information that is out there and gets posted on, Facebook sites or whatever. And so our thought about, just speaking informally to people we know to make sure people know what the facts and data are, rather than relying on some of the social media information. That's all the term influencer spokespeople means.
And I appreciate that, but I did see your meetings are at 1 o'clock. I mean, people at work, myself, cannot attend at 1 o'clock. So it's hard to attend. So I watch the meetings afterwards, but I can't be there live. So could you just describe what an influencer spokesperson is? Well, no, but so that you give them data and they go out and talk to other people? I'm just not clear. Can you answer that? Can somebody?
I don't know what your question is.
Yeah, I don't really know how to
Understand
answer
your question.
that.
Could you clarify your question?
Yes, I'd be happy to. My question is, Susan just said an influencer is an influencer spokesperson. And I'm just asking, does that influencer spokesperson get somehow tasked to go out and speak to people?
We can't task anybody to do anything.
Oh, okay, so I guess I just don't understand what an influencer spokesperson.
No. Maybe it's the inappropriate word, in which case we'll change the language and say, we're going to do outreach to other citizens in the town to make sure everybody understands what the MBTA law is all about.
I'm sure you have many informal conversations about it with people you know. That's what.
Oh, of course. I mean, I'm sure we all do. I hope we all do. That's kind of our task.
I think we're just trying to make sure that the message that gets out there is based on the facts and not
Right.
on misinformation.
Okay, so I was misinformed that there were some targeted people in town to be influencer spokespeople. So one, I got misinformation, so that's fine. But so yeah, I mean, I'm just want to state that we have to be clear that this is about educating residents and it's not kind of like a marketing campaign. I'd like to see if the planning board or the task force communication subcommittee is reaching out to the residents that are in these districts, right? Are we doing mailers to residents? Are we meeting
Well,
with
the town
them
has
in
to
groups?
pay for mailers, so that's a very expensive thing for the town to do, and there's very limited money for that. And
There's
I
also
think-
an outreach plan that Tiffany put together that's posted on the website, which describes all the ways that we're trying to communicate with the citizens of the town.
But the other thing on your point about, we are going to do a town-wide mailing, making sure everyone knows what the law is, what it means, and describe each of the districts. And we have been in communication after communication, town-wide. We just got something in our tax bill, with an update. We remind people, scan this QR code, look at the districts online. Tiffany is constantly every week putting something on the town social media, saying, here are the links to the districts. There's a lot of information out there.
And I agree, and I think there's a lot of people that never see any of that, so I'm just saying, if I was a resident within one of these districts, I would hope that the town would send.
I don't think it's appropriate for us to do that.
Right,
actually.
I mean, and you're singling out people living in a district. I mean, there are different views. Is it a benefit? Is it not a benefit?
They might be
It
very
needs,
happy,
it needs
yeah.
to go
But they need to
town-wide,
know.
not just to the people who live in specific districts.
Well, I agree that mailings should go townwide, but I see many towns are sending out to the residents, the homeowners in these districts that are being impacted. And it doesn't have to be a negative, it can be a positive. They might be thrilled to be in it, but I think if your home is being rezoned.
No, it's
or
always being rezoned.
the
That's the
potential-
kind of misinformation.
It's not, because you could have your neighbor have a completely different structure than what was there
We are
currently.
placing overlay, no one's being rezoned.
Of course it's being rezoned.
No, it's not. What we're doing is we're adding an overlay district.
Right, so
Rezoning implies that the current zoning goes away and is being rezoned.
it's
That's not what's
being,
happening.
okay, just like influence, maybe I used the wrong word, it's being
You did.
additionally zoned. So, if you're somebody and you live in a single residence district and you expect only a single residence gonna be next door to you, but you get something in the mail and say that might not be true, I think that's beneficial. I mean, sure, we can debate this all day long, but I'm discouraged that as a planning board member mentioning something, all I do is get attacked as opposed to saying, all right, we'll think about that, or sorry, that was confusing. It's very difficult communicating with this board and, it's unfortunate, but I will still voice my opinions.
Well, we hope you do.
Okay, great. Any other updates? It being 9:45, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. No, I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for your questions tonight. Getting there.
Yes, absolutely. I think mailing should go out.